You are a product manager shipping product without knowing how to write code, barely knowing how to review code.
I have zero technical background, did music in high school when Sonnet 3.5 came out. I remember watching a YouTube video building apps using Bolt or Lovable. It basically felt like someone came up to me and said, you have superpowers now.
These days, you're using Cursor with Claude Code.
If you're non-technical like me, code is terrifying, but AI just makes so much possible. In the next coming years, I think everyone's going to become a builder. Titles are going to collapse and responsibilities are going to collapse.
The main challenge people have is reviewing the code that AI has written.
It's very difficult for me to catch mistakes. What I'll do is basically /review. This tells Claude to start reviewing its own code. But what's even cooler is I have Codex as well as Cursor open. I will have each of them review the code.
This comes back to this quote I think everyone's always hearing. It's not that you will be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by someone who's better at using AI than you.
It's the best time to be a junior, contrary to what a lot of people are saying, how there's no more junior roles out there. Yeah, that's true. But also, when else in history could you get out of school and just build a startup on your own?
Today, my guest is Zevi Arnowitz. Zevi's a PM at Meta. Prior to that, he was a PM at Wix. And this is a truly remarkable conversation that every non-technical product person needs to hear. Zevi is super young and has no technical background, but as a smart, young, ambitious person, has learned how to use Cursor and Claude Code to build significant and real products completely on his own, and he's created his own very clever and effective workflow that everyone listening can copy. To make that copying even easier, at the top of the show notes of this episode, you can download all of the prompts and /commands and start doing all of this yourself. Zevi shows you how to work with Cursor to quickly add your ideas to Linear, to explore your idea with AI, how to develop your plan, how to then build the thing, and then have different LLMs review your code and update your documentation, and then use all of this as a learning opportunity to develop your own sense of how things work. I haven't stopped thinking about this conversation since we had it, and everyone needs to pay attention to what AI is unlocking for non-technical people. A huge thank you to Tal Ravi for encouraging me to meet Zevi. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It helps tremendously. And if you become an annual subscriber of my newsletter, you get 19 premium products for free for an entire year, including Lovable, Replit, Bold, Gamma, N8N, Linear, Devon, Post-Talk, Superhuman, Descript, Whisperflow, Perplexity, Warp, Granola, Magic Pattern, Dracast, ChatPRD, Mobbin, and Stripe Atlas. Head on over to lennysnewsletter.com and click Product Pass. With that, I bring you Zevi Arnowitz after a short word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by 10Web, the company that pioneered AI website building before ChatGPT. In the last 3 years, over 2 million websites have been generated with 10Web's vibe coding platform. 10Web's vibe coding platform is a powerful way to build websites. Think of it as Lovable for WordPress, front-end and back-end. Users can build any website at any complexity: e-commerce, portfolios, information websites, blogs, and it comes with the WordPress admin panel and thousands of ready-to-use plugins. 10Web also offers website generation as an API as a service for SaaS companies, marketplaces, hosting providers, MSPs, and agencies. SaaS companies can embed it via API so that users can launch AI-generated sites directly inside of their platform, connected to their own data. Agencies and MSPs can get a white label dashboard to manage clients and resell under their brand. Hosting providers can self-host the API builder on their own infrastructure. Check it out at 10web.io/Lenny and use code Lenny for exclusive free credits and 30% off API or white labeled solutions. That's the number 10web.io/Lenny. Vibe coding platform as an API. Today's episode is brought to you by DX, the developer intelligence platform designed by leading researchers. To thrive in the AI era, organizations need to adapt quickly. But many organization leaders struggle to answer pressing questions like, which tools are working? How are they being used? What's actually driving value? DX provides the data and insights that leaders need to navigate this shift. With DX, companies like Dropbox, Booking.com, Adyen, and Intercom get a deep understanding of how AI is providing value to their developers and what impact AI is having on engineering productivity. To learn more, visit DX's website at getdx.com/Lenny. That's getdx.com/Lenny. Zevi, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lenny. I'm a huge fan of the show, and tons of people that I've admired most and learned the most from have been on here. So it's a crazy moment for me. I'm really excited for this.
I really appreciate that. I want to start by reading actually a note I got about you from Tal Raviv, who is a previous podcast guest, many-time newsletter collaborator, one of the most AI-forward product managers that I know. I've learned a ton from him. So here's what he said about you when he introduced us. Zevi is the most hands-on vibe coding PM I know, and I personally learned so much from him. His engineers at Meta ask him to teach them how to do what he does. Every time we get coffee, I repeatedly get this feeling of everyone needs to be hearing this.
That's so nice.
And so that's the goal. That's the goal of this conversation, is to help more people hear what you figured out. We're going to get very hands-on. We're going to do a lot of show versus tell, showing people what you've figured out about how to be a PM, a non-technical PM building stuff. I want to give people a little bit of background on you, because I think this is going to inspire a lot of listeners to feel like they can also do what we're about to show you. It's going to look very advanced, but just give people a little bit of sense of just your background.
I'm very non-technical. I have zero technical background, did music in high school. A lot of Israelis do technology units in the army. I was not in a tech unit. And basically a year ago, I was traveling with my wife for 3 months in Asia, and we were in Japan. And that was around when Sonnet 3.5 came out. And I remember watching a YouTube video. I think it was either Greg Eisenberg or Riley Brown. And they were basically building apps using, it was either Bolt or Lovable, just using AI. And it was like a crazy moment for me, because I was watching this and it basically felt like someone came up to me and said, hey, Zevi, there's this cool new technology you should check out. You should really give it a try. Oh, and by the way, you have superpowers now. And the second I got home from Japan, I didn't even unpack my bags, ran to my computer, opened Bolt, opened an account. And for the past year, I've been building. And the last thing I'll say on that is, we talked about this a bit before we started recording, but I was prepping with Claude for the episode, and I was trying to clarify what my goal is for this episode. And Claude said, if people walk away thinking how amazing you are, you failed. And if people walk away and open their computer and start building, you've succeeded. So I really hope that we can inspire some people to do the same.
I love that so much. I feel like that should be the goal for my podcast. If you're like, I love that guest, it's less of a win if it's just like, oh, I'm so inspired to do the thing that they figured out. That is the real win. I love Claude is the best.
I agree.
Okay, so let's dive in and give people, let's start with kind of a high level overview of how you operate and use AI in your job. What are the core tools, and just what's kind of like the frame of reference for the workflow that you figured out and how you operate?
This all started where I was a projects power user. I love projects, GPT projects.
GPT projects.
Yeah, exactly. GPT projects and Claude projects, which are basically a shared folder of chats, which share both custom instructions and shared knowledge base. And I think it was around when GPT started using memory, where I thought it was interesting, but it really annoyed me, because I do a bunch of different things. Like, I'm a terrible runner. I'm a PM. I was a student, psychology student. So I had all these different facets of life. And what happened was the memory feature was mixing stuff up. So like, I talked to GPT about running, and it would say, oh yeah, after this 5K, you're going to crush all your next product reviews. And it's like, I mean, okay, I understand that you have that in your memory, but it's just not relevant. And projects basically allows you to compartmentalize and have things within the right context. So tracking back to the story I told, when we came back from Japan, I started building this app. The first thing I noticed was that these products were built in a way where, and when I say these products, I mean Bolt and Lovable, were built in a way where they were super eager to write code. So their system prompt was, you're a coding agent. So when you'd write something, they'd straight away start coding. So at the beginning of a project, this was super fun and exciting, because they just go and start building your app. But later on, when things got more complex, this created much more problems, because planning is really important when you're implementing something technical. And let's say you're implementing payments or something that's going to be a change to your database. If the coding agent is just like, all right, I got it, and just starts writing code, this always results in terrible things, some really gnarly bugs that I had. And to mitigate this, what I did was I created sort of a CTO. So again, I'm not technical. I have been in product for a while, but I know zero stuff about code. So basically what I did was I created a CTO with the custom prompt of it being the complete technical owner of the project. So I told it, I own the problem. I own how we want the users to feel. You're the complete owner of how this is going to be built. I want you to challenge me. I don't want you to be a people pleaser. All these things that kind of mitigate the regular ChatGPT-isms. I always think about this where for some reason, the easiest way for me to think about AI is to imagine it as people. And I think ChatGPT would probably be the worst CTO because it's such a people pleaser and it's so sycophantic where, I mean, just a short story I had a few weeks ago, I was trying to learn about Bun JavaScript, which was acquired by Anthropic, and I was trying to understand what they do. So I was talking to GPT, and this wasn't within my co-founder CTO project. And I asked it if it's similar to a different framework that I have in my app called ZooStand, which nothing to do at all with what Bun JavaScript does. And basically, GPT goes, "Oh yeah, it's exactly the same." And then it started talking about what it meant, and I was like, "Wait, no, these are not the same at all." And it said like the most terrifying and hilarious thing. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were just making this up, and I was riffing with you." And I was like, "Oh no, 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 this is terrible." So basically, if regular ChatGPT was a CTO, that would be the CTO who like goes along with your dumbest ideas. So creating the project allowed me to mitigate that.
So this is just to be super clear, you have a ChatGPT project that you've given a prompt to be your CTO of your product, and being a non-technical person, this is kind of like the thing you talk to when you don't and we'll get to what you're actually using to build when you have questions about architecture and decisions that are technical.
Yeah, so now I'll show my full workflow, and I don't involve GPT anymore, but I definitely would recommend, even though the technology has gone. So when I started this, there was no plan mode or ask mode. It was just build on these products on Lovable and Bolt, and they've progressed a ton. A lot of what I had as workflows have become ingrained in these products, which is really interesting. I would still recommend start with a project for, first of all, the reason that I said, and also it kind of puts you in a place where you're in a chatbot and not writing code. So you take the time to converse and to learn, which I think is critical. And the second thing is, if you're non-technical like me, code is terrifying. It's the scariest thing in the world to look at. And I look at it as kind of like exposure therapy. I think if you see this where I'm working like in Claude or in Cursor, you might be excited to start using those. But I would really recommend starting slow with a GPT project, beautiful UI, super simple, then maybe graduate to like a Bolt or a Lovable, and then go to Cursor in light mode, slowly, gradually ease in until you like open a terminal, go full dark mode, go full dev. So I would really recommend doing this gradually.
That is awesome advice. And so just to be clear, these days you're using Cursor with Claude Code powering it. And what I love about that is that you've never written code. The way you put it, you're afraid of even looking at code. You have to do exposure therapy. And I love that Cursor is useful to you. And what you're telling us is that graduating from a ChatGPT project that is kind of your technical co-founder kind of taught you enough to feel more comfortable going straight to Cursor. You said that you actually went to Boulder and Lovable kind of in the interim, and then you went to just straight to Cursor. What's the reason to just go straight to Cursor? Is it just because Cursor can do everything, and once you get the hang of it, it's actually the most powerful tool?
Yeah, I think I graduated from each tool when I kind of outgrew it. So Bolt was awesome until I was trying to connect payments to my app. And it kind of started losing it. And then I graduated to Cursor. And I've actually fallen in love with Claude. So I'm using Claude Code, but that also runs within Cursor. And I think this is Tal who told me this. I'm not sure who he's quoting. But code is just words at the end of the day. So it's just files on your computer. So basically, you can be working on the same project and carry it from app to app. And especially now, I can work with multiple models and apps on my project. So start slow, but definitely there's a lot of places you can graduate to.
Awesome. Okay, should we dive into screen share showing how you operate?
Awesome. I pulled up Cursor. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So within my code base, what you can see here on the left, these are all my code files. Here on the right is cursor. So this is basically like having AI, which has access to all the code. And here in the middle, I have Claude Code running. And what you can see here, I'm going to close cursor for a second. What you can see here are all my slash commands. Basically what slash commands are, they are reusable prompts that I save within the code base that I can run by writing slash and then the name of the file. So here you can see create issue, which is the first command that I'm going to use. And basically what this tells Claude, it says the user is mid-development and thought of a bug or a feature and improvement, capture it fast so they can keep working. And then it basically says, this is the format that I want you to capture the linear issue in. And it explains a bunch of things, what exactly Claude needs to do to get there. So the way I invoke this is basically I'll do slash create issue. And this injects this prompt into Claude. So it says, I'm ready to help you to capture this issue. What's on your mind? So basically when I'll do this is if I'm working on a big project and I suddenly come across a bug or have an idea that I don't want to work on right now, but I want to work on later, I'll do this really quick. And Claude's main goal is to quickly capture what I'm thinking about. So quickly to run through my full workflow. So basically it starts with creating an issue. So this is the create issue slash command, which basically tells Claude that I'm mid-development and it should quickly capture what I'm thinking about and create an issue within linear. Then later on, when I want to pick this up, I have the exploration phase. Exploration phase is basically telling Claude, we're going to only explore what we want to solve here. It could either pull from linear or I can just speak freely to it. And what it will do is it will analyze and understand the issue and just ask clarifying questions. The next phase, after we've finished exploration phase, is we're going to create a plan. So you can see create plan. This basically has a template that I love for creating a plans. And the output of this at the end of the day will be a markdown file with our plan that we can end up building along with code. After creating the plan, we have execute plan. After execution, we have review. And then we have peer review, which is really cool and we'll get into later on. And at the end, we update the docs. So this is updating documentation and everything so that agents can write better code later on. So I think what we'll do is we're going to build a feature live for my app, which I think is really cool. But first, what I'd like to do is show you the app so you have some context. So this is StudyMate. It's a platform for students, which allows them to upload study materials and create interactive tests based on their own materials. So here we can go to the top. Let's upload a PDF. We can decide what pages we want to be quizzed on. We can decide the number of questions, the difficulty level. And basically what happens behind the scenes is we send the information the user uploaded along with the system prompt and any other augmentations the users decided to Gemini, and we create a quiz. These are challenging questions that are meant to assess comprehension. You even have some hints. And once we do a few of these, we can submit. I got them right.
Terrible results.
Yeah, lucky.
And so just to be really clear about this is like a side business that you have, an app that you built that's making money. That's just like a thing you vibe coded, having no technical
this is
experience.
my weekend project. Yeah, this is what
Awesome.
I do on weekends. So you get basically deep explanations into why each question was wrong or each question was right. And at the moment, StudyMate only has multiple choice questions. And I was doing some competitor research over the last weekend, and I saw competitors who had true or false questions and also fill in the blank questions, which I loved. So I think that'd be really cool if we could build that live.
I love it. Crossing your fingers this will work. I just want to highlight the stuff you shared right before this in Cursor. So this is a huge deal, what you describe here. This is essentially what you've figured out is a way as a person that has no idea how to write any code, how to build a product in Cursor as a product manager using this series of slash commands that you've concocted that you're going to be sharing with listeners. They can download all these and just use them directly. They don't have to figure out all these prompts that you've figured out.
Yeah, 100%. Basically, what happened was I formulated the backbone of this with the CTO, and it was basically within the system prompt of the CTO project that I had within GPT. So it said, step 1, we do this. Step 2, we do this. And now I'll keep building, and if I see something that happens over and over again, I'll just create a slash command, and then it will be automated within the workflow.
Amazing. So just to summarize the slash commands. So one is create an issue in Linear, which I love. Linear is awesome. Shout out
That's
Linear.
also from the product pass.
From the product pass. There you go. Oh my God, what value. Okay, so step one is create the issue in Linear. So it's a command. So this prompt slash command you've created, just create issue. Then it's explore, which is explore the idea, help me ideate on what this could be. And this is Claude helping you think through the feature and product. And then it's actually create the plan. And so it's like the AI helping you build the plan to build the product. Then it's actually execute, which is just build the thing. And then there's this review, peer review step, which is awesome that you'll share. And then there's document, update documentation based on this new feature that we're adding. Sweet.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go ahead and start building. So I'm going to use Whisperflow to dictate. And basically this starts with slash create issue. So this basically sends that prompt. And I love this because I usually do this during when I'm building something else. So basically it tells Claude that I'm mid building something and I don't have a lot of time to waste time on this. So just ask some brief questions so that you have enough to capture within Linear. So I want to add fill in the blank questions to StudyMate. I want this to be 30% of tests to be generated as fill in the blank questions. I want there to be 6 potential answers for 2 blank spots. And of course, there's only going to be 2 correct answers. So 1 correct answer and 2 incorrect answers for each spot. And I want the interface to be drag and drop. So that's just basically a quick think of how I want this to work. So it's going to ask me a few questions. Quizzes are 100% multiple choice. Question structure, single sentence passed with 2 blanks, and priority. So 1 and 2 are correct. And this is not high priority. It's a nice to have feature. So now basically what Claude is going to do is it's going to use MCP, which is basically technology that was created by Anthropic, which gives AI the ability to use tools. So this is connected to my Linear. So what it's going to do now is it's going to use everything we've said and create an issue within Linear.
And by the way, as this is loading, I just love the way you describe this, especially doing voice mode. It's like exactly how you would talk to an engineer, describing a feature. Here's what I want, and then they ask you questions. Here's the clarification.
Yeah. So at first, when I was doing this with the CTO, I would do it with ChatGPT voice mode, and that was crazy. That was like literally felt like ideating with a person. It would push back, ask questions, and maybe one day, you know, the coding tools will get there too. But that was exactly, it really felt like sitting with my CTO. Great. So created STU88. So if we open up Linear now, we should be able to see, let's see where, STU88. There it is. Fill in the blank questions with drag and drop interface. So it has a TLDR, it has the current state. It did a little bit of research on the code base, I think, expected outcomes, some context. So yeah, so this is basically ready for me to pick up when I'm interested in building. So now let's say a few days go by, I finish the current project I'm working on, I can pick it up. So when I pick it up, I do slash exploration phase, which is what we said. And then instead of pressing enter, I'll press tab and I'll show you this. So basically exploration phase, what it does is it will take an argument. This is basically a placeholder within the prompt, which allows me to enter something that is extra context for the AI. So I can say here, Linear STU88, which is referencing the ticket. And now what it's going to do is it's going to fetch the Linear ticket.
And what's the idea? What's the goal of the exploration phase? This is kind of ideate on the idea. Is that the idea? Okay,
so it's both for the CTO to deeply understand the problem that we're trying to solve and also understand the current state of the code base, what files need to be affected, and how is the best way to implement this technically. And usually what happens is right now, Claude's just basically reading a bunch of files, understanding the basic structure of the code, and then it's going to come back with a bunch of clarifying questions as that will decide how we end up implementing this.
So it's like, it feels like it's talking to your engineering manager.
Exactly. 100%. This is how I think about it.
And you said that your CTO, so you used to use ChatGPT prompt to have a CTO in there. Now the CTO is living inside here in Cursor.
Yeah, because of the way the tools have developed, and they become so good at both exploration and code execution. So now it's just a kind of a habit that I call it a CTO, but it's basically all in one. The same agent will both do the exploration and write the plan and end up executing the code.
Got it. So it's Claude Code. Is there like a prompt you gave it to act like that, to act like the right kind of CTO?
Yeah, so within the Claude MD, which is basically the system prompt that's loaded within Claude's context in every conversation, I have some basic stuff like, this is our workflow, this is how we work. Within exploration phase, I want you to challenge my thinking, all kinds of stuff like that. That can be
Awesome. Okay.
loaded, yeah, within the Claude MD file.
Cool. One last
Um,
question before we move on here, just because I'm thinking about it as this happens. The linear issue that you generated, how often is it actually great and ready? How often do you have to edit it? What's like the quality of the linear ticket that it generates? Because a lot of people are like probably wondering, just like, oh, these terrible linear issues are being created by AI. Are they actually any good?
it's completely different because I'm a company of one. So a lot of the context is within here, and there's no need for me to like talk to other teams and understand. It's basically very accessible, and also I can easily see when Claude understood something wrong. I don't want to say that I would create linear issues at work like this, but definitely if you're building your own side project, it's they're pretty quality, and also it just kicks off the when I want to start working on it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's ready to be built. It's ready to start being explored.
Got it. So it's just the beginning of an idea. Actually, let's come back after we go through this flow of how you would approach this if you were at, say, Meta or another, maybe a smaller company, how this workflow might work at a larger company that isn't just your own startup.
Yeah, interesting.
Let's come back to that.
Cool. All right. So this is Claude coming back. I have a comprehensive understanding of the code base. I thoroughly analyze StudyMate live code base and understand the current system, feature requests, and key areas that it's identified. Usually I'd spend a lot of time going over this because this is super, super important. But just for the sake of development right now, we're going to brush through this. Now Claude basically comes back after it's gone through the code base and understood the way it currently works. It's basically telling me what the current understanding is. So it's talking about how the app is set up at the moment, how the data is structured, what it understood from the feature request, and what it has identified as key areas. And then it asks me some questions. So it's asking about the scope. It's asking about the data model, the UX UI of the feature, how it should be validated, how it should be graded, what changes need to be happened to the AI system prompt, and all kinds of questions about the app. I've prepared answers to all these questions beforehand because I don't think we all want to sit through this. So I'm just going to paste that in and we'll see what Claude says.
Awesome. I love it. And I love just scanning those questions it was asking. It's like such smart, sophisticated, important questions instead of just, cool, here I go, I'm going to build it.
Yeah, and I think this is the big difference between like just vibe coding and going along with the vibes and really building serious apps. I spend a lot of time going back and forth and understanding. Also, a very cool slash command that I haven't showed yet is learning opportunity, which basically when something is really difficult for me to understand, I'll do slash learning opportunity and then talk about what I want to learn. And this basically primes Claude and says, I am a technical PM in the making. I have mid-level engineering knowledge. I understand architecture. And basically, I want you to explain what we're currently working on using the 80-20 rule. So this is a great way to learn. I would definitely take this. And every time you kind of see something that you don't fully understand, I would definitely use this to learn. Great. So Claude basically comes back and says how it understands the current data model and how it's going to implement. So it's ready to create the plan. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and do slash create plan. And while Claude's doing this, I'm going to show really quick what this looks like. So basically these plans are from a template that I found on Twitter. I forgot who it was, but it was just a template that really resonated with me. And it's basically saying, based on our exchange, create a markdown file that will be the plan. Include clear, minimal, concise steps, track the status. So this basically has like status trackers on each task that Claude updates as it's going through. And it will have a TLDR, some critical decisions that we've made, and the plan itself. So Claude's finished writing the plan. So we'll be able to look and see exactly what the plan is. So it has a TLDR, it has the critical decisions we've made, and the tasks broken down. And this is a perfect plan. And it's also a really good way to write this because a lot of times I'll use different models to execute certain stuff. So Cursor has an amazing model called Composer, which is super fast. So a lot of things that are not that complex, I'll use Composer. Gemini 3 that just came out is unbelievable at UI. So a lot of times I'll split the plan into backend and front end, and then I'll have Gemini just read the plan and do the front end. So having this as a markdown file is really good. And also going forward, it's really good to have within the app so that later on, if an agent is writing code in a certain area, it can see what's already been done there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to execute the plan. So now I think we're going to do this with Cursor just because Composer is so freaking fast. So what we can do is basically just say execute, and then we can tag the file. And Composer is ridiculously fast. So that's it. It's off. It basically understands what the plan is, and it's going to go ahead and start writing the code.
Let me ask you a question while this is happening. And
Awesome.
I have many questions, so this is a good time to ask a few of them. You said that Lovable and Bolt are, and other, other apps in that space are just not enough to build really serious apps, and you had to move to Cursor to do that. Tell us more about that. Just like how far, what's kind of limitation you ran into with those products and why you switched to Cursor?
I started using Cursor and Claude Code a few months ago, and I haven't looked back. But at that time, these teams have been moving like crazy. So I don't want to say I wouldn't trust them. I don't know what the current state is. But for me, it was basically the issue of I felt that that Bolt was being very opinionated on how I should do things. And I felt like my knowledge has gotten to a point where I can graduate and be more in control. By the way, I think that the main difference between all these tools is basically the harness. So the models are all the same models. I'll run Claude within Cursor, I'll run it within Claude Code. And it's also the models that Claude is also the model that is underlying Bolt and Lovable. But basically, Bolt and Lovable will add a bunch of levels in the middle that will take all kind of guesswork and hard decisions out for the user. So the user doesn't have to make these hard decisions. So it's also very easy to build. But the flip side of that is that you have less control. And basically, Claude Code is just taking Claude and shoving it straight in your code system and giving it full tools and to do whatever it wants. But also with that comes a lot of decisions that you need to make. So I don't know if you can't build really amazing production apps using Bolt or Lovable now, but I think basically if you want the most cutting edge abilities of the models and you want to be able to make all the decisions on your own, it's probably best to be on one of these tools.
What I'm feeling and hearing is that planning work that you did, that's the stuff that Lovable, Bolt, and would you put Replit in that bucket too?
Yeah, for sure. Lovable,
Okay.
Bolt, Replit, Base 44.
V0.
Yeah, V0, all same bucket.
So essentially, they're doing that planning for you. And as you said, they're very opinionated. They're trying to make it easy. So it's just like, here's how to do it. We're not going to, here's the way we think is best for people. And what you're saying is once you're trying to get a little more serious about it or want to go in a different direction, you don't have the power to change how they plan. So Cursor lets you do that.
Yeah, I don't want this to come out like I'm bad-mouthing them. Base 44, let's say. Yeah, Base 44 does an amazing job at basically taking all the complex guesswork out of building product and just allows you to just, go with the vibes and build. But it will do sign in with Google for you, and it will do a database. But then you don't have decisions on what database am I using? Do I need sign in with Google this way or another way? It would just do it out of the box. So that's basically the trade-off there.
Awesome. Shout out Mayor, the founder of Base 44.
Yeah,
on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Okay. I just love how this is like the way you're like flinging, what's the word? Slinging models like Gemini 3 for front end. Like, I love that you've never written any code. And you're just like, cool, we use Gemini for this and Claude for this. And I'm just working on Cursor, talking to this CTO, helping you build stuff and build like significant product.
Yeah. I mean, we just live in the craziest of times where basically the world changes once a week, it feels like. And there is just no boundaries. You can use all of these just on your like regular MacBook or regular laptop. And I have these moments. I call them time machine moments, which is basically this week, for instance, I was prepping for the podcast using Claude with a project. I was fully localizing StudyMate from Hebrew to English, which I did in 2 days, which would probably take a dev team weeks. And I was building a personal site, which went from no domain, no nothing to live on a domain within an hour and a half. And I was doing all three of these in parallel. And there was a point where basically all three of the agents were running. So I didn't have anything to do. I just had to let them think. And these are like the time machine moments where I feel like I was in the future and I just stick my head out of the time machine, and whoever's next to me, like at the moment it was my wife, I'll just say, we live in the future. And she'll be like, huh, what? And I'll be like, no, don't worry about it. But it's just basically so crazy that all these things are just, an API away. You can use anything. So I think it's an awesome time to be curious and optimistic and hardworking.
These are my favorite kinds of podcast guests. People that are living in the future, figuring out all these things, and then are just kind of come back, as you said, poke your head out of the rocket ship and just like, hey, here's this thing that I figured out. Here's where we're going.
Yeah. Best time to be alive.
I agree.
So awesome. So it looks like it's finished. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run the app locally, and we'll be able to see what Composer ended up building, and we're going to see if anything else is needed on our end to maybe do some manual review. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. And I love that was like, I don't know, a few minutes, where if it was a human engineer, it'd be like days, maybe a week.
For
of
sure.
work.
Yeah, for
Incredible.
sure. No, Composer, like the one thing is it's just so blazing fast, keeps you in flow. So yeah, full features take minutes.
And that probably costs
Um,
like a couple bucks in AI credits.
I don't even look. I mean, I used to be so stingy about paying for products, and now I'm just basically I look at it all as tuition, as like stuff that I'm paying for learning. So I don't know how much it costs, but it's definitely worth it.
That explains why they're the fastest growing products in history.
100%.
Your marketing website sets the tone for your brand and is the one touch point that every single one of your customers sees. In today's age, if you're still having a hard time making small changes and simple updates to it, you're doing something wrong. That is why so many companies, from early stage startups to Fortune 500s, including companies like DoorDash, Zapier, Perplexity, and 11 Labs, turn to Framer, the website builder that turns your .com from a formality into a tool for growth. Framer works like your team's favorite design tool and comes with real-time collaboration, a robust CMS with everything you need for great SEO, and advanced analytics that includes integrated A/B testing. Changes to your Framer site go live to the web in seconds with a single click and without any help from engineering. Whether you want to launch a new site, test a few landing pages, or migrate your full .com, Framer has programs for startups, scale-ups, and large enterprises to make going from idea to live site as easy and fast as possible. Learn how to turn your website into a growth engine from a Framer expert, or get started building for free today at framer.com/Lenny. That's framer.com/Lenny. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So now we have this feature, which basically we built, and I can ask it to make some changes because it's running locally. And once it's ready, I'll be able to ship it to users. So now the next phase, after I've QA'd it and basically tested it manually, I'll have Claude review its own work. So what I'll do is I'll reopen Claude Code.
I love this because this is one of the things that comes up a lot on this podcast is writing code is now so easy. The main challenge people have is reviewing the code that AI has written. And what you're
100%.
doing here is you're having Claude review its own code.
Yeah, so this is another thing where it's very difficult for me to catch mistakes. So my review process has gone through a bunch of iterations to really be as good as possible and to catch as many things as possible. So I'll always manually QA it first to make sure if I can see any mistakes that Claude made. And then what I'll do is basically /review. And this tells Claude to start reviewing its own code. But what's even cooler and something that I'm really proud of is I will usually do multiple reviews, and I'll have Codex, which is ChatGPT's competitor to Claude Code, as well as Cursor open, and I will have each of them review the code. And then what I do is I have a slash command called peer review, which is really interesting. And basically what it does is it's going to take Claude, which is usually the agent who I'm working with. And just to put this in a mental model, this is basically my dev lead that I'm working with. I will take the slash command is basically saying, you're the dev lead on this project. Other team leads within the company have looked at your code and reviewed it and found these issues. Don't take what they said at face value. The reason is you have more context than them and you led this project. You need to either explain why the stuff they found are not real issues and wrong, or fix them yourself. And it's really cool because the way I look at these things is I look at the models, I try to imagine them as people, and I can really tell you how each one of these would be as a real human, because each model has such distinct characteristics. So let's say Claude, she would be the perfect CTO. Like, she's very communicative, she's very smart. She doesn't just go with the flow and do whatever you tell her. She's very opinionated, but also super collaborative, which is, I think, why I'm always drawn to Claude, because I need to do so much learning and like it's your dream, a very communicative but very opinionated dev lead. But then there's also Codex. So I use Codex 5.1 max, whatever. I don't know. They're not the best at naming models, but GPT's model, I always imagine it as like the best coder within the company who comes to the office like with a hoodie and sandals and sits in a dark room, and you basically only bother him when you have the worst bugs. And you say, listen, we have this bug, and it will just close the door for 2 hours and come out and say, I fixed it. And you're like, wait, what? You're going to tell us what happened or what? And it's like, don't worry about it. I fixed it. It's like really not communicative, but it solves all the worst problems. And let's say Gemini is like a crazy scientist who's super artsy, super talented at designing. But if you sit next to it and watch it work, it's terrifying. Like, you would fire that person instantly. This might be just my experience, but when I'm using Gemini within Anti-Gravity, which is Google's new competitor to Cursor, when it's writing code, you can see the steps it's taking, and it's terrifying. Like, you'll say, I want you to redesign the top of the dashboard. And you're looking at its thought process, and it will say, oh, first things first, I'll delete the dashboard. And then it'll be like, nope, that was a mistake. I'll bring it back. And then it will say, oh, can I edit the database? And you're like, no, do not edit the database. You're just doing a redesign. And then it will end up designing something beautiful. So the way there is like a roller coaster and very scary. But at the end of the day, Gemini is very good at design. So I think that using all these models and basically playing to their strengths and mitigating their weaknesses by using other models is a game changer for me. So I'll do peer review a bunch of times, and I'll have other models review other models' code and kind of have them like fight it out, basically. Like, sometimes Claude Code will get really sassy and be like, this has been raised for the third time. And for the third time, I'm telling you, this is not an issue. This is by design. So it's just a really cool thing that I've added, and I haven't seen many people doing it.
That is such an incredible rant slash way to understand what's going on. Okay, awesome. So we just ran the review. So show us what we saw there, and let's actually try this peer review. I'm really excited to see what you learned there.
Yeah. So basically, Claude has reviewed its code, and it's found a bunch of bugs. A critical bug it found in the prompt, some high bugs, some medium bugs. And now what I'll do is I'll do the same thing with the other models. So Codex has a built-in code review that you can do, or I just like to say review all the code in this branch. Of course, branch is referring to the GitHub branch that we're working on. We're not working on the live code base. And then I'll do this with Composer, let's do it with Composer 1. So I'll do /review here as well. And basically, these are both going to run and do a in-depth review similar to what Claude does. But again, because of the differences between the models, they're all going to catch different things, and they're all going to look differently. And this is a really cool way to work. It's basically if you had other team leads within the company review the code. Here, you can see how fast Composer is. I think GPT probably will take a bunch of time. Like I said, it's in its own dark room right now reviewing code, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
we could let these run, and we don't actually have to go through the whole process. But is the idea once you get these results, you run peer review and you copy and paste kind of these results? Is that the idea?
Exactly. I'll copy and
Okay,
paste
cool.
the results. I'll do peer review, and then I'll say dev lead 1 and then paste from one of the models. And then I'll say dev lead 2 and paste from the other model, and basically have them fight it out until I feel like we have no more issues.
Incredible.
For me, this is super important because I'm not
Yeah.
technical and I'm not a developer. And I'll also use / learning opportunity a bunch during this to learn about stuff that I don't understand or don't fully grasp.
Incredible. What a clever solution to solving this code review problem where it's like, I don't know what I don't know how to recode. So what am I gonna even, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Incredible. Let's wrap up this workflow. Is there anything else that's important in this workflow? And again, all this stuff is going to be available where people can just plug this stuff into their Cursor account and use it themselves.
100%. The one thing I'll say is that I think just like working in general with AI, and even just like working on any product, doing constant postmortems is critical. So a lot of times we'll find all these kind of bugs, or maybe Claude will fail to execute something correctly. And at the beginning, when I started vibe coding, I would basically just keep running at it, like running at the wall, and until it worked. And once it worked, I was like, all right, awesome, this works. Let's keep going. But I've learned over time that updating documentation and tooling is one of the biggest hacks for productivity. So when Claude will fail to do something, or I'll see this really bad bug that shows that Claude really didn't understand something, I'll ask it, what in your system prompt or tooling made you make this mistake? And Claude will kind of like go introspective and think of what made it create that mistake. And then I'll say, okay, great. Let's update your tooling and documentation so that this mistake never occurs again. And I do this every time I'm either building an internal tool or anything. And I think this is just like working, if you end up doing a bunch of mistakes and then end up releasing the feature to users. So you're like, all right, it's a big success. But going back, and even when you've succeeded, looking and understanding what you did and what you could have done better is critical. And also using AI, this is probably one of the biggest unlocks. Going back to your prompts, understanding what was not good enough, iterating on them, and then seeing how AI's responses get better. I think that's probably one of the most important things, and one of the things that divides between people who are like okay with using AI and the people who actually know how to use it.
That is such good advice. So what I'm hearing is when the models do something dumb, make a mistake, you ask it to reflect on what the mistake it made was, and then you update the / command prompts with that knowledge so that in the future it's not making that same mistake. And it just keeps getting better. These things just keep getting smarter and smarter. So you're building up this really incredible prompt that just gets better and better.
Exactly. Not always the / commands. It will sometimes update different documentation or its tooling, but basically it's understanding what the root cause of the mistake that the AI made and fixing it.
Awesome. So it's not, so like the models are getting smarter, and then there's also the other parts of your workflow can get smarter as you find flaws in the way it does stuff.
100%. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Is there anything else there before I move in a couple other directions?
I think that's it. I think we covered pretty much everything. Basically, just to wrap this up, what I do is I do a bunch of code review and then update the documentation so that everything is documented. So the next time I try to build a feature in this area, there won't be any mistakes. And then I'll do a bunch of testing. I'll do some user testing as well before I release this to general availability. Obviously, we're not going to release this. This was just a show. But hopefully maybe by the time the podcast comes out, I'll have done this correctly and release the feature.
It's incredible that this was not possible, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. Like, you are a product manager shipping a product without knowing how to write code, barely knowing how to review code. You said you're afraid of looking at code. As a product manager, you're building a product in Cursor using all of these different AI models. You're making money with this product. This is like, we're so used to this now, but it's insane what is now possible.
It's the best time to be alive, 100%. I think that I understand the fear, but AI just makes so much possible. Just a quick side note here. My brother, who I'm building one of the apps with, is an entrepreneur. He has a beautiful business that helps old people and seniors understand to use technology and AI better. And he's basically doing the same kind of learning as me. And he's replaced all of the tools he was paying for. I think he was paying for Zapier and Airtable. And he's basically built like a full-fledged CRM system and automation system for his business completely alone. So, I mean, for the people who are curious, optimistic, hardworking, this is the best time to be a builder.
And what I love about this conversation we're having here is it feels like the biggest barrier for a lot of people is like, how do I get started? What exactly do I do? I open up Cursor, it looks very intimidating. I don't know how to write code. I don't know how to build stuff. I don't know about databases. And so you're going to be sharing all these slash commands and basically this whole workflow with the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, just start in GPT, tell it what your idea is, tell it to explain to you what are even the first steps of thinking, what are the decisions you need to make, and just be inquisitive, learn. Don't rush things. It's very important to just dive in and really spend the time to learn.
And you share this, one of your slash commands is learning opportunity. And it's how you learn a lot of these things. Just like teach me this thing of how this database issue works.
Exactly.
Okay, there's a couple directions I want to make sure we touch on. One is coming back to a question I asked earlier about how this might work at a larger company. Say it's not like Meta, but just like, I don't know, 1,000-person company, 500 people. How much of this can you plug and play into a workflow as a PM at a larger company? What would be your advice for someone that may want to start trying to ship code, at least showing people what's possible?
I think that first making your code base AI native is a really important step. And I think this needs to be done by technical people. So basically, my code base has a ton of just plain text in it. So it will have a bunch of markdown files that explain to agents how to work in certain areas of the code base, and high level structure so that the agents navigate through the code base easier. And I think that if this is set up in a really good way, I still don't think like PMs should be shipping heavy database chain migrations or any like big project, but contained UI projects, especially if you just build it, create the PR and send it to a dev to like do the final finishes. I think that's definitely something that's possible. And I think we're going to see that a lot in the next coming years. I think basically everyone's going to become a builder. So it should be really interesting.
Okay, so your advice here is, as a PM, don't go right to Cursor, start building, shipping, trying to ship features to production, especially complicated features. Do you think we'll get there? Do you think like in a couple of years, PMs will be doing this and it'll feel less scary and crazy?
If there are PMs, yeah, I think titles are going to collapse and responsibilities are going to collapse, and everyone's just going to be building. I definitely think that the context window is getting bigger. The models are getting smarter. And I definitely see how PMs or any other background can be writing. At the moment, I wouldn't wait for that. I would use this as a collaborative learning opportunity to work with your dev team. It's going to be difficult. A lot of developers are very, very skeptic about the current state. And I think that it's going to be a lot of sales work on your end to convince. But if you're able to convince, and I think teams that are really sold on this and want to take the time to work on their workflow about how can our team become more AI native, I think that these teams are going to probably be a few years in the future, and they're going to look back at the few weeks they spent setting this up as the best time they spent.
Let me ask you another question around just the job of a PM. One of the biggest fears people have with these AI tools for PMs, for every function, I imagine, is just you start to rely on these things, your skills start to atrophy, you're producing all this slop that looks great, cool, amazing strategy document. Now it's actually not at all good. Or these linear tickets or just products that are like half baked. What's your take on kind of these two parts of just like, how has this impacted your craft as a PM? Do you feel like this is weakening your skills because you're so reliant on these tools? And just how do you keep the quality of this stuff up and not just like, man, it's just a bunch of AI generated slop?
I have a very strong disagree to this, and I've heard it a bunch. I remember when I started using Tal Raviv, has like this whole course on building a PM Copilot using projects, which is probably one of the best courses that you can take. And when I started working with my own Copilot, I remember people at work looking and saying like, oh, so you're basically outsourcing your thinking. And to me, that's just the worst way to look at it. And I think for some reason, these people usually have a high correlation with the kind of person who doesn't like to show their presentation when it's only 10% done, or doesn't want to ask for help a lot. I think that there's a misconception with a lot of PMs that the job is always having the right answers and being the smartest person in the room. And at least how I was trained and how I believe the role of the PM is, it's the exact opposite. It's basically harnessing anything that can get us as quick as possible to delivering the right solution to users. And I just think this is like that really smart person that has context, or your mentor or whatever, but is just always available and doesn't judge you, and can really help you. So if you're using it to just create your outputs and then putting them out there, I mean, yeah, that's AI slop, but it's also human error. I think it's really important that you own your own outputs. If you put anything out there, or show something in a product review and you say, oh, sorry, that was built by AI, that's your mistake. I think if you use these intentionally and really take the time to understand how to use AI in the correct way, it's one of the biggest game changers that will make you much better as a PM. And another thing here is that, especially for more junior PMs, it allows you to play at such a higher level than you would normally. Like, I think that at Wix, I wasn't thinking of what's the marketing strategy of the company and how will the onboarding be completely revamped within the whole product. But I mean, on my side product, I can just do whatever decisions I want and think of the strategy and marketing and the messaging. And this is basically just getting me reps, which is one of the most important things at the beginning of your career. So I understand the fear that, how do you outsource certain stuff and you're not owning 100% of everything. But I think the upside is so much more valuable. And I think the only way that AI makes you worse at your job is if you're using it wrong.
Is there anything that you've learned about reducing the sloppiness of the output? Just like a tip for keeping the quality high of the stuff that it produces.
Similar to people, setting up AI for success for the task at hand. So like if I just brought in, a junior to write a deck or something, and I didn't give it any guideline, I just said, give a strategy deck. He would probably just go online and find, top strategy deck and just reproduce that, which is basically what AI is doing. It's basically just fed all of the internet. So instead of that, guiding it and giving it context on what your style of writing is and what you're trying to solve, and all these different things, I think that's probably one of the biggest unlocks. So that's just a quick tip. And also, Cursor has a / command called dslop, which is basically going back over the code. I don't know if this is integrated into the product yet, but it's on Twitter. Their founders have been talking about this. So that's definitely something I would run after, just to make sure that no slop is left behind.
That is so funny. Dslop. Okay. One more question, which may lead to something else, but kind of going in a whole different direction. You used AI to help you actually interview for the job that you got at Meta. Talk about how you did that, because a lot of people right now are struggling to find a job, reading about all these people using AI to help them interview. You actually did it. What did you use? What worked?
I feel like the analogy here is I have 12 nieces and nephews, and you can see how people who have grown up in a different world, how their mind is formed differently. So if you ask me, how do you answer a phone? I'll do this. But a child now, when you say, how do you answer the phone? They'll do this. They'll do the iPhone answer. And I feel like people who are growing up now in their professional lives, we're the same, just with AI. So every time I'm faced with a new challenge or problem, I think AI first, how to solve it. So Meta reached out and said they'd like me to interview. Straight away, I opened up a project within Claude. I started looking online for all the best information out there, things that I resonated with. I took a ton of frameworks and stuff from Ben Erez, who's written a guest post for you, who I think is one of the best minds out there right now. And basically, I created a project which was my coach, which I would come and consult what to do at each phase. I would mock interview with. And this was amazing. Also, I created a game in base 44, which helped me. I was really struggling with segmentation within the product questions. So thinking of the correct segments. So I basically just created a quiz game, which creates questions and different segmentations, and I have to choose. So this was like, I spun this up. It's a web app that I would play sometimes when I was on the bus to work. So basically, I think Ben talks about this a bunch, so I don't like just go read Ben's stuff, but just creating a project and feeding it with all the best information on the internet and then mocking a bunch. I will say that the biggest game changer for me was doing human mocks. So cold outreaching to people on LinkedIn and having them do actual mocks for me. I think that at the end of the day, especially for the meta PM prep, which is super competitive and difficult, I think there's no way to get around that.
That is so cool. They use that post. I wasn't aware. We're going to link to it. And in that post, Ben shares all these prompts you can feed ChatGPT to help you prepare for interviews, do mocks online. It's a really important point to say that those take you to a point, but it's actually better to use humans. I actually have a post coming out soon in collaboration with Noam Segal about how everyone's using AI to interview. And one of the most interesting ways I've heard people and that we found in this research was that people use it to get feedback. They record the interview and then it gives them feedback. Here's where you could have done better. Here's what you missed. Because the feedback loop is so missing. No one ever tells you, here's what you did badly in this interview. No one tells you that. And AI can do that.
So I'll add two things to that. One, which is exactly this. So I'll mock with AI. Also, I did something really cool where there's a question bank online, free by Lewis Lynn, which basically is an always updating bank of questions that people are asked in real interviews. And I basically used Comet, which is the Perplexity's browser. And I had the agent run all kinds of analyses on like what the most asked questions are. And that's how I knew how to prioritize what questions I would mock. And then at the end of these mocks, I would tell Claude within the project, you're my coach, and I don't want you to make me feel good. I want you to make me as ready as possible for these interviews. So give me feedback, like you said. And the other thing that I did was really cool was some questions where I didn't have time to mock, I would ask Claude to play the candidate. And then it would just give me a really good answer. And I could also learn from that, like learning from someone who does a perfect answer.
Oh, man. I really love the way you phrased it, that people kind of in your generation, the default is I have something I need to do. Let's go to AI immediately and help me prepare for this thing, help me figure it out.
Yeah.
And this comes back to this quote that I always think about, which I think everyone's always hearing, but it's such an important quote that it's not that you will be replaced by AI, at least for a long time. It's you'll be replaced by someone who's better at using AI than you.
I agree.
And that's what these conversations are for, to help people keep up with all that and to learn some of these skills and, again, see where the future is going and start to learn how to get there yourself. Okay, Zevi, before we get to our very exciting lightning round, I'm going to take us to a recurring segment on this podcast I call Failure Corner. And why I love this segment is people come on this, just even this conversation, it's like all these amazing things you figured out, everything's going so well. People rarely hear the things that don't go well. And those are often the most interesting and impactful stories. So the question is just what's a story of a time you failed in your career, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I love this. I love Failure Corner. Big fan. So I'll tell a story about when I started at Wix. So basically I started within Wix's student program, and straight out of the student program, you get put into a certain team. So I was in the editor, which is the core product of Wix, and the other PMs were just the best PMs almost at Wix. Like there's 4 other people had much more experience than me, and they were ridiculously good. And I remember coming in and thinking, like, my first product review, I'm going to blow these people's socks off. They're not going to believe how good of a PM I am. And I basically didn't really share what I was thinking. I would work tons of hours alone, and I was like, I'm going to kill this product review. They're going to be so impressed. And I ended up failing miserably. My product review was not good. It wasn't the format they expected. They had a ton of questions that I missed. And I felt awful when it was over. I was like, you're such an idiot. And I saw that everyone was like, all right, cool. Yeah, just come back in 2 weeks and we'll keep getting at this. And I understood in that moment that they had zero expectation of me being a 10x PM. but the expectation of me was being a 10x learner. And the second I understood that, my whole mindset shifted. And I think this is probably the best tip that I give now to junior PMs is basically be the best learner you can be at the beginning. No one expects you to know all the answers, and no one expects you to be good. So basically what I did was I took each person on the PM team. There was 4 other PMs, and I assessed what their strength is and use them as a mentor for that. So Neri, who's still my mentor till today, he has the best product sense of anyone I've met. Oya is super, she's like a methodology expert. She just thinks in frameworks. Yara, who is the head of product, basically can look at a product and then instantly understand like the third and fourth order effects of them, system thinking. So every time I had an issue with one of these areas, I would come to one of them and consult them. And this does 2 things. First of all, I learned a ton. And the second thing is that when the next product review, my success felt to them like their success, because it wasn't this kid who's trying to show us up how cool he is. It was like our mentee kind of making us all proud. And it was such a great shift for me. And basically, at the end of the day, I really excelled through this.
That is an awesome story. And this idea of learning is such a good thread throughout this whole conversation, that AI is good at getting stuff done, but it's also really good at helping you learn how to do the thing and to be this partner, this thought partner, the way you talked about the interview process you went through and this learning opportunity / command. So awesome. Great story. Zevi, okay. Before we get to our very exciting lightning round, is there anything else that you wanted to share? Anything you want to leave listeners with?
Yeah. So kind of to tie back into the first thing I said, where if people walk away thinking, Zevi's so cool, then I've failed here. I think that it's just the best time to be alive. I think it's the best time to be a junior. Contrary to what a lot of people are saying, how, there's no more junior roles out there and people get out of school and you can't find a role. Yeah, that's true. But also, when else in history could you get out of school and just build a startup, on your own with a couple of friends, completely bootstrapped? And I see more and more people towards the end of the time at my time at Wix, I was interviewing, and I saw more and more people building their own stuff with AI. And I think, contrary to what a lot of people think, it's the best time to be a junior. It's the best time to be a learner. And I think if any listener is listening to this and you're a curious person, you're a hardworking person, I want to say kind, I'm not sure, but if you're a kind person and a good communicator, you have such an unfair advantage, and you can give more value to companies than most people who have 20 years of experience. So I really hope people get inspired by this and start killing it with their projects.
Amazing. So many ways to be inspired from this conversation. Zevi, with that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
So I'll take one from each kind of genre. So in like fiction, I love The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, one of my favorite books. Really makes you think, really makes you feel. Business books, I'm a big fan of Shoe Dog, the Nike story.
I just finished reading that. So funny.
It's amazing.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah. I love Shoe Dog. And then more on like the psychology side, Mindset by Carol Dweck, who coined the term growth mindset. It's just such an amazing book. It kind of sounds like a self-help book, but then you understand that it's completely psychological and is based on research. And that book completely changed my life. Really, I was always with a fixed mindset. And then after reading that, I kind of understood that it was something holding me back. And since then, I've been really, really trying to cultivate a growth mindset. So I really recommend everyone reading that.
Again, connects to that thread of the way you described it, being a 10x learner versus a 10x doer. Okay, next question. Favorite recent movie or TV show you have really enjoyed?
Yeah, actually, my wife is really into film, so we watch a lot of TV. It's probably our favorite together time. I just finished watching The Pit, which was amazing. It was really good. And my first recommendation to everyone is, if you haven't seen Severance, run to see Severance, one of my favorite shows.
Is there a favorite product that you have recently discovered that you really love?
This is a good question. I'm always trying new products. Like, I'll always have 3 or 4 browsers installed on my computer and all this different kind of stuff. And I recently discovered a Loom alternative. I I was kind of disappointed with Loom. They were taking so much money, and the product, I don't know, I just didn't love it. And there's an open source alternative called Cap, which is just really well crafted. You can see that the person was like really sweating the details, and it's just a really, really great alternative. So I've been using that recently.
There's also a product called Supercut that I love. That's also a Loom alternative.
Mm.
Shout out. Okay, 2 more questions. Do you have a favorite life motto that you find yourself coming back to in work or in life?
Yeah, I'm kind of between two right now. One, which is like become a Twitter meme, basically, which is you can just do things. I feel like that is basically going always in my head every time I do something, that I'm just shocked at the speed and ability to do things now. So you can just do things. And the second one I stole from my brother. His motto is nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. And I just love that. And I think it kind of makes you take life more lightly. So yeah, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
I think people see these companies on the outside and it feels like everything they've got all figured out. And if you're ever on the inside of a company that's doing really well, you're like, how is this staying on the rails? How is this still a thing that is working? Doesn't make any sense. It's all about to fall apart. Yeah. Okay. Last question. You've had a long entrepreneurial thread throughout your career. There's a couple other real world businesses you've started in the past. You did a thermal clothing business and then like a hummus delivery thing. So maybe pick one of those and just tell the story of what that's about.
Yeah, I'd love to. Really fun that you asked about this. So I'll tell the thermal clothing because I think it's really cool. So in high school, I was selling thermal clothes in 10th grade for one of my sister's friends or something. And basically, it was just packs of thermal clothing, shirt and pants. I grew up in Jerusalem, so it's a bit chillier there. So it was perfect for the weather. And in 10th grade, when I was selling them, they were like $20, $25 a piece. And I was making like $4 a sale. And if you look in the food chain, I was like 6th or 7th down the line. So this was like crazy margins. So during the summer, I thought about it like I should just go straight to the importer. So throughout the summer, I called the importer. And at first he was really, really mad. He was like, no, you have to work for me for years to get to this state. And I said, listen, man, I'm finishing school soon. This is not going to be my career. Either do it or not. And we basically negotiated throughout the whole summer. And this was also like how I did things before ChatGPT. So he would like throw out something. He'd say, oh, the import tax has gone up. And I'll just search Google, like import tax Israel, and like start reading. And I'll be on the phone with him and I'll be like, hey, I would just basically stall. And then I'd somehow come back with a challenge. And I ended up getting a really great price, like $12.50 a piece. So I was making like 100% profit. And I spread throughout a bunch of different schools. Each school I had the coolest people in school selling for me. And then a really fun thing that I did was we had a really awesome basketball team. And like our basketball team would basically be 30 points up within the first half. And it kind of got boring for the crowd. So I wrote a song, like a basketball chant about thermal clothes that basically has my number within it. And like the end of it was, if you join in now, we'll give you a discount. And it was with drums and everything. And still when I go to Jerusalem, I know like some people who I don't even know my number by heart because they know it by the tune. And sometimes when I walk in Jerusalem, people stop me and say like, hey, it's Thermal Zevi. So that was just a really cool experience as a kid.
This explains so much. Just the marketing genius of that move. Oh man. Okay, Zevi, this was incredible. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you if they want to reach out, maybe follow up on some of the stuff? We'll link to the scripts and prompts and all that in the show notes, so you don't have to read that. And then how can listeners be useful to you?
Awesome. So I've been helped throughout my whole career a ton. So I love helping any way I can. So reach out on LinkedIn or on X. I really love to help whoever I can. How can listeners be useful to me? So if you're a student, try StudyMate. Tell me what you think. If you're in Israel and you're not using dictation yet, try Text. Tell me what you think.
Amazing. I just love how much you're giving away and how useful this can be to so many people. So again, we'll link to that in the show notes. Zevi, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing so much. This is going to help, I think, a lot of people. And I think it's going to help people get over the hump on, okay, I see all these people doing cool stuff. Here's how I can actually do this stuff. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing so much.
Thank you for having me. And if you build something cool with some stuff that I learned here, so hit me up, send me. I'd love to see.
Amazing. Zevi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.
There's this belief that everybody needs to be a founder. I think in some ways our industry would be much better off if there were fewer founders. I think there's an entire category of smart, creative, hardworking, talented, borderline visionary people who can raise that $2 million seed and go off and build some stupid company that's never going to go anywhere. That would be so much better off finding a team that needs their skill set and working on a problem that has a mathematical formula that's going to win on any metric, whatever metric you care about. You want like the acclaim of your peers, you want financial reward, you want outsized impact on culture, like whatever the thing is that gets you out of bed every morning, you can achieve that in collaboration with others. You don't have to be the person that raises the seed round.
Today, my guest is Tom Conrad. Tom was an engineer at Apple, CTO of Pandora, which he helped take from 0 to 80 million users. He's also VP of product at Snap, where he's the right-hand man to Evan Spiegel for 2 years. He's been on the board of Sonos for over 7 years. He was also part of 2 infamous product failures, Quibi, where he was chief product officer, which raised over $2 billion and died less than a year after launch. He was also a senior engineering leader at Pets.com, which famously went from nothing to a public company to completely out of business in 19 months. Today, Tom is the CEO of Zero Longevity Science, which is on a mission to extend the lifespan and the health span of the human race. In our conversation, we dig into what Tom's learned from these famous product failures, also what he's learned from the many product successes. Tom also shares what he's learned about how to pick where to go work and what to avoid, how important understanding the math formula of the business model is, also lessons on burnout and health and leadership, and Contrarian Corner. With that, I bring you Tom Conrad after a short word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Coda. You've heard me talk about how Coda is the doc that brings it all together, and how it can help your team run smoother and be more efficient. I know this firsthand because Coda does that for me. I use Coda every day to wrangle my newsletter content calendar, my interview notes for podcasts, and to coordinate my sponsors. More recently, I actually wrote a whole post on how Coda's product team operates, and within that post, they shared a dozen templates that they use internally to run their product team, including managing the roadmap, their OKR process, getting internal feedback, and essentially their whole product development process is done within Coda. If your team's work is spread out across different documents and spreadsheets and a stack of workflow tools, that's why you need Coda. Coda puts data in one centralized location, regardless of format, eliminating roadblocks that can slow your team down. Coda allows your team to operate on the same information and collaborate in one place. Take advantage of this special limited time offer just for startups. Sign up today at coda.io/Lenny and get $1,000 startup credit on your first statement. That's coda.io/Lenny to sign up and get a startup credit of $1,000. coda.io/Lenny. You fell in love with building products for a reason, but sometimes the day-to-day reality is a little different than you imagined. Instead of dreaming up big ideas, talking to customers, and crafting a strategy, you're drowning in spreadsheets and roadmap updates, and you're spending your days basically putting out fires. A better way is possible. Introducing Jira Product Discovery, the new prioritization and road mapping tool built for product teams by Atlassian. With Jira Product Discovery, you can gather all your product ideas and insights in one place and prioritize confidently, finally replacing those endless spreadsheets. Create and share custom product roadmaps with any stakeholder in seconds, and it's all built on Jira, where your engineering team is already working, so true collaboration is finally possible. Great products are built by great teams, not just engineers. Sales, support, leadership, even Greg from finance. Anyone that you want can contribute ideas, feedback, and insights in Jira Product Discovery for free. No catch. And it's only $10 a month for you. Say goodbye to your spreadsheets and the never-ending alignment efforts. The old way of doing product management is over. Rediscover what's possible with Jira Product Discovery. Try it for free at Atlassian.com/Lenny. That's Atlassian.com/Lenny. Tom, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so fun to get to be a part of this.
I thought it'd be fun to start with a story about your time at Apple and you building this now very ubiquitous feature of dragging and dropping something into a folder, which I saw you tweet about or talk about at a talk, and the fact that it's still around. Can you just share that story and maybe a lesson from that experience that you've taken away?
Sure. So let's see. I was 15 years old when the Macintosh came out. I remember really clearly my entire, teenage years, like all I wanted to do was to move from Columbus, Ohio to Cupertino and work for Apple. And my heroes were that team of people that had written their signatures on the inside of the Macintosh. We cracked open the first Macintosh case. You would find the signatures of the 20 people or so who worked on the Mac. And that was my only ambition, truly. And I mean, this was a period where no one wanted to work for Apple. I mean, that wasn't a thing. And it seems like maybe a little obvious today, but it wasn't an obvious ambition at all back then. So anyway, I went to college. That's all I wanted to do. Studied computer engineering at University of Michigan. And as we talk about my career, it's just over and over and over. I'm going to say, an incredibly lucky thing happened. And the first incredibly lucky thing that happened for me in my career probably was that University of Michigan happened to be a place that Apple recruited from. I didn't know that when I chose the school, but it made it reasonably easy to connect to a hiring manager at Apple. And I wrote an actual letter and put it in an actual envelope and put it in the mail and got an internship and drove out in my dad's Pontiac from the Midwest to California, spent a summer interning. And my last day of the internship, I was thinking about really what I wanted to do when I hopefully came back to Apple after I graduated. I had worked on a product that became shipped. It was called the QuickDraw GX. It was an earlier kind of second generation rendering system for the Mac. I'd been that team's intern for the summer. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to work on the Finder. This is the only thing in the whole world I really wanted to do. And so I went and found Ron Lichty, who is the manager of the Finder team, and said, I graduate in 10 months. I'd love to be a part of your team. And I think he was kind of like, well, why are you coming and talking to me now? You're literally going back to Michigan tomorrow. So I go back to Michigan in May, the phone rings and Ron says, the college recruiting department just told me that I have a college hiring rec. And if I don't use it by tomorrow, I lose it. So he's like, I can't even interview you. You can't meet the team, but you're basically a freebie for me. So do you want this job? So just insanely lucky moment, got this job. So yeah, I get to Apple in the summer of 1992 and I have a laundry list of things that I would like to do to make the Finder more, usable. And I remember sitting in Ron's office and saying, at the grocery store when you're carrying bags of groceries out, the door is automatically open for you. I think the Finder should do the same thing when you're dragging an icon around and you want to put it in a folder. You should be able to kind of hover maybe over the folder icons and drill down into the file system to get to where you're going. And then when you drop the file, all of the folders that opened up between you and your source and your destination would close for you. Ron thought that was a fine idea. And so that was the way Apple worked in those days. I just went off and started, coding that up. And I got to the point late one night, 2 a.m, I'm at Apple, no one else is there, where I needed some kind of animation to indicate that the folder was about to open. And I'm certainly not an animator, and I certainly wasn't going to do anything thoughtful in the middle of the night. So I just wrote some code that blinked the folder selected, unselected, selected, unselected 5 times. And thought, I'll get, one of the really talented visual designers to do something much more interesting. Long story short, Apple finally shipped that feature 4 years later. It sat in the source code repository forever while we did other things. And when it shipped 4 years later, it blinked 5 times. Roll the clock forward 6 or 7 years, Mac OS 10 comes out, entirely new Finder, rewritten from scratch, no spring-loaded folders anywhere to be seen. People complained about it. It got re-implemented. So all of the code, brand new. Folder blinks 5 times when you hover over it. Roll the clock forward another decade, iOS comes along, and they added folders. And when you drag an icon around, it blinks a few times. I'm not sure what the point of this story is, other than maybe it's something about, I think we all do this as designers and product people. We take these shortcuts that we think that we'll go back later and clean up. And sometimes, I mean, it's literally been 30 years. That little design detail like lingers, 3 implementations later. And now it's just a part of the way that these Apple products work. Pretty bizarre.
As you were talking, I'm on a Mac right now recording this, and I just did it just to make sure it's still there. And it is indeed still there. I think it blinks 3 times and then just opens up for you.
There you go.
If only engineers got royalties on features they build that continue to live on in a product.
Okay, I'll tell you just one other little thing to center you in time about what the Finder was like in 1992. We didn't get royalties, but our names were in the About box. You would go to About the Finder, and the 7 of us, there were 7 engineers at Apple that worked on the Finder. Wow. Our names would scroll by, the Finder, copyright 1992, yada, 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 one name after another. Totally different era.
It feels like you got kind of what you wanted with the name scribbled on the motherboard.
For sure. I've gotten a lot of the things I wanted as a kid.
So kind of along the same lines, I want to talk a bit about picking where to go work. Clearly, you had a sense you wanted to go work at Apple. Over your career, you've landed at a lot of really successful places. You've also landed at a lot of very famous failures that we're going to talk about. What advice would you give people for helping them pick where to go work based on your experience?
When I was a kid, my ambition to work at Apple was entirely about the product. And so probably that version of me would say, find a product that you're passionate about and go spend your time and energy on that thing. Pretty quickly, you learn that an awful lot of your development and day-to-day satisfaction really comes from the people that you get to collaborate with. Can you learn from them? Do you like them? Do they challenge you in the right ways? Do they give you latitude in the right ways? It's so much about not just what, but who. And so for a very long time, my advice would have been entirely in the category of find something that you love with people that you think are amazing, and the rest will kind of take care of itself. And interestingly, I have been lucky enough to have some things that were successful, on the metrics get talked about the most, big audiences, big financial return, et cetera, et cetera. And I've also worked on some things that were really notable disasters. When I look back on my career and think about the things that I've done, my professional satisfaction is not well correlated with those sort of external metrics, and very, very coordinated with, did I love the thing we were building, and did I love the people I was working with?
Following the thread of the people, I think one of the hardest things is really knowing what the people are like until you join. I think as a chief product officer joining or VP of product, you have a lot of time that you spend with the team. Most people don't. They have an interview and then they're like, all right, I got to make a decision. Do you have any advice for how to help people get a sense of if the people are the kind of people they want to work with?
I think people are really, really good at this. I mean, every single time I've taken a job where it turned out that I was, working with people who had a different set of, values or working styles than I had, I knew, and you tell yourself that, at least in my case, I tell myself the story about why the thing I suspect, might be the case, isn't the case. But, you do this in your personal life all the time, right? You meet people out at dinner, so you get, seated next to them at some industry event or something. And sometimes you come home and say to your partner, oh my gosh, the person next to me was just the worst. And then sometimes you're I think I made a permanent, lifelong connection with this total stranger who just happened to sit next to me.
It's a very simple piece of advice that I think people don't fully appreciate, is just trust your instinct, trust your gut.
Yeah.
Just pay attention to what comes up when you're around people at a certain company. Okay, so you brought up this phrase of notable disasters, and I want to talk about that. You worked at 2 of the most famous notable disasters of product companies, Pets.com and Quibi. I think it's really rare someone sees the inside of so much hype and then such a fall at a company. And so I just want to spend some time in these two areas. And maybe the way to set it up is just what's a lesson you took away from each of these two experiences that you've taken with you to future work, and maybe advice you share with people?
Probably the biggest lesson, it's not really about like the specifics of the business. The biggest lesson really is these things make you better. They, in some instances, actually, I think in both instances, they became kind of dominoes that opened doors for me in my own ambition and my own sort of, professional life that maybe just wouldn't have opened at all if I hadn't gone to those companies and learned those things and had those experiences. And frankly, even in the case of pets.com, like even the high profile nature of it, I could have worked at one of 1,000 e-commerce websites in 1999. And when I went on to some subsequent job interview or something and talked about my experience, people were like, I had never heard of the thing that you worked on. But everybody certainly heard about pets.com. It's a pretty funny example, too, of how some struggles are like timeless. That was 20, 23, 24 years ago now. And while as a leadership team, we made, I'm sure, all kinds of mistakes, one of the things that happened was that there were 3 kind of overfunded pet e-commerce sites. And we all raised in excess of $50 million, which is a tremendous amount of money now. It was a tremendous amount of money then. And we all thought it was a zero-sum game, and that we, as one player started to spend on promotion or to spend irrationally on, national broadcast television advertising, we all did. And it became this kind of unwinnable arms race. So there is I think a fundamental lesson about having an excess of investment can be its own albatross or lead you to make decisions that maybe would be or unwise. And then of course it's just like, timing is really important. Chewy is a online pet store. It's worth $9 billion today. They were a private company and bought by PetSmart and then spun back out. But when they were bought by PetSmart, they were acquired for $3 billion. Biggest e-commerce acquisition of all time. And while I think it's probably unfair to compare Chewy, who executed exceptionally well over a decade, grew their business brick by brick and turned it into something really remarkable, to pets.com, which was, in a very, very different moment in time and tried to go to market in a really different way. The critique that is often leveled at pets.com, or at least at the time, was like, this is just a stupid business. They're shipping dog food around. You could never make that work. And like that's just wrong. Like you absolutely can make it work. Probably can't make it work when 80% of the country on the internet is still on dial-up. It's really, really early.
I saw a stat, I think you shared somewhere, that you took pets.com from nothing to a public company to completely out of business in 19 months.
Yeah, I think that's about right. The other thing that's forgotten in the tale is that we actually didn't go bankrupt. We shut the company down and returned the remaining balance to the investors, which no public company had ever done before. And the leadership team just reached the conclusion that given the way market conditions had evolved, there was just no way we were going to be able to get more capital into the company. And it was a company that required, additional investment to get to profitability. And so it was better to sort of wind down early, take the money that we had in the bank and get it back to investors than to just spend every last penny on what was sort of a fruitless attempt to salvage it.
Did not know that. Let's talk about Quibi. What went wrong there? Do you think there was a path to Quibi having worked out? Any big lessons that you took away from that experience that you bring with you?
The kind of miraculous thing about Quibi for me was it relit my enthusiasm for the industry, for doing this work. I had left in, I think it was December of 2018. And I thought that maybe I was just done making software. I had done it for a really long time. I'd done it for 25 years or something. And I had changed a lot. The industry had changed a lot. And I thought maybe I just didn't have the same passion for it that I had, a decade before. And it also seemed like maybe it'd be fun to have like another chapter of my life that was just completely different. And I had a whole list of things that I thought I might want to do. I mean, they're kind of ridiculous. It's like, maybe I want to be a pastry chef. Maybe I want to be a landscape photographer. Maybe I want to, learn to make bad music to put up on SoundCloud or something. And really the only thing they had in common were they were all things that I knew nothing about. People would be like, oh, you think you might want to be a pastry chef? Do you like to bake? And I'd be like, no, I don't know anything about baking. Oh, you think you might landscape photography? Do you take photos? No, I don't make photos. But I was kind of committed to the bit, actually, to the point where when TechCrunch interviewed me about my departure from Snapchat, I was like, I'm out. I'm going to do something else entirely. So that story is very much out there. But a few months after my last day at Snap, I got a call from Meg Whitman and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who were starting up, it was called New TV at the time. And, the pitch was, we're going to try to take the best of mobile and Silicon Valley and consumer tech and sort of weld it to the best of sort of Hollywood style content production to build something like completely bespoke and purpose made for consumption on the phone. They were looking for both technology leadership and product leadership and wanted to know if I was interested in one or both. And I took the meeting, even though I wasn't really taking these kinds of calls from anybody. It just seemed like who's going to pass up the opportunity to have lunch with the two of them. So I listened to the pitch and politely declined and told them that I was going to be like a pastry chef or something. And we kept doing that every couple of months for like 7 months. We'd go to lunch. They would give me an update on the progress they were making. And I would decline, the invitation to get involved somehow. And then late in that year, I went to lunch one more time. And Meg explained that they brought on someone to lead technology and they brought on another person to lead product. And both of them, for reasons that are completely disconnected from Quibi itself, both of them had left after about 6 weeks. And Meg's like, we've raised all this money and we've told the world that we're shipping this product in about a year. We got an awful lot to do and I really could use some help. And I would consider it a personal favor if you would come and spend just a couple days a week helping. She's like, I'll continue to look for someone who actually wants the job, but it'd be great if you could help me get this off the ground. And my wife is a freelance writer, marketing strategist, and loves her life as a freelance contributor. And she's like, you should do this. Like, why not? It's 2 days a week. It's just a few months. What's the worst thing that could happen? Like maybe you'll like it. And I'm like, no, here's the thing that will happen. Like, I won't do it 2 days a week. It will immediately be 3 days, then 4 days, then 5 days, then 6 days. Like, I just know myself. And she's like, no, she's like, just on Wednesday night at 6:00, close your Quibi laptop and be like, all they're paying me for is for Tuesday and Wednesday, and then open it back up on Tuesday morning. Like, that's all you've got to do. Well, she's right about most things, and she's wrong about this. I fell, deeply into it right away. And it was just so fun to get to build a team from scratch and to design and build a product from scratch and to take advantage of all of the sort of modern software architecture stuff that had come into being over the course of the 15 years since we had started Pandora. And, I'm embarrassed about some of what happened with Quibi for sure. But I'm super grateful for the experience because I just really fell in love with the industry again and was reminded of just how rewarding it can be to build something and to try to put it out there, even if you stumble pretty mightily along the way.
Is there something that you took away from that experience that taught you what to try to avoid, what to try to pull towards?
I think I sort of misunderstood or misjudged companies sometimes by thinking about them like really focused on the product execution. Kind of if you find an interesting problem that people care about and you solve that problem in a really beautiful, elegant, delightful way that's 10 times better than anything else that they can get in that same space, they'll tell their friends and all the rest will sort of take care of itself. And so that was always my ambition. Find a thing that I cared about building, do a great job building it in a really delightful way, go really deep on listening to people and their feedback, and iterate your way to success and sort of breaking through that membrane that we all strive to get across to, kind of really great word of mouth. But I think the thing I've come to better appreciate is that companies are also kind of they're kind of a math problem that describes how you take, investment and pour them into the equation, and out the other side comes returns on some time horizon. And yes, there are variables in that equation that are influenced by the product that you build and all of the little details and decisions that you make about making that product great. But if the equation is fundamentally broken or a big swing in and of itself, no amount of iteration and execution can kind of get you out of the failed outputs of the broken equation. And I think, Quibi made a bet that you could build an entirely bespoke content library that was sufficiently scaled to get people to subscribe and retain for a couple $2 billion. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. But, we made 70 shows in 18 months, which is more content than all of the major broadcast networks combined made in a single year. So it's a pretty major accomplishment. And we made a bet that we would augment those sort of episodic and serialized sort of Hollywood style shows with a bunch of daily content that we produce at the level of network television, nightly news, and so forth. That would be an alternative to some of the sort of daily content that you might otherwise get on YouTube. And that was going to be about a third of the content spend. One super interesting thing that no one talks about is that all of that content was designed to be made day of or day before it aired. So there was no back catalog of it. And it was all designed to be shot in these professional studios that we built out. And it was really expensive. Like I said, it was a third of the investment we were going to make in content, maybe almost half the investment we were going to make in content. And we launched 2 weeks into COVID, and we couldn't make any of that content except literally in the garages of the hosts' homes. And so we had this thing that was supposed to seem really set apart from YouTube that literally now was being made exactly like YouTube content, which is sort of self-produced at home with, very little sort of the support infrastructure of Hollywood. Now, you can argue, I think the content on YouTube is really, really exceptional in this category. And maybe we were never going to do better than that. But I think what was really fundamentally broken with Quibi was that the actual foundational equation of can you make enough premium content that's totally bespoke and made for the service and takes advantage of the unique nature of the phone. Is that enough content to get people to sign up and retain? And can you do that for a couple $2 billion? And I think the answer is no. The library has to be much, much bigger. And you have to have, any company, you have to have sufficient time and energy to iterate on the content format itself, because our roadmap really wanted to innovate on the content format. And so I think part of what happened is pretty quickly it became clear that the math was just wrong. It wasn't going to take 2 billion. It was going to take 6 or 8 or 10 billion. And the risk reward profile of betting 10 billion on the format was just more than anyone can stomach.
Wow. I really like this metaphor and this mental model of the math formula of the entire business and thinking of it that way. I knew COVID changed the way people consumed content, and that hurt Quibi because I think it was meant to be on the go. Not sitting at home where you could watch anything you want.
Yeah.
But also the fact that the content couldn't be made as well as you were hoping to make.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
As a CPO, one of the biggest challenges is pushing back, trying to convince the founders of their mistakes, of doing what they want and just powering through it and dealing with it sometimes. I guess, is there anything you think you could have done looking back, or is the math formula set up for failure from the beginning and it's probably just not going to work out almost no matter what you did?
One of the bets was that we weren't going to just use the apparatus of Hollywood to like make the content. In part, we were going to use the apparatus of Hollywood to market the content. So, Jeffrey had recruited this incredible Rolodex of literally the world's most famous celebrities to make shows for Quibi. We kind of had like everyone either made something for launch or was going to make something. And like part of what they were going to do is like turn up in culture and talk about their shows. I mean, we've heard a lot in the last 6 months about how hard it is to market movies because the stars can't go out and talk about the movies during the strike. There was this theory that you could apply the marketing sort of technique of Hollywood to get 20, 30 million people into the theater on like opening weekend for Quibi. And that was always like a very, very audacious take, I thought. Like, Uber has all the money in the world to experiment with paid user acquisition, and they're not consistently a top 10 most downloaded app in the App Store. But the theory of Quibi, like the math of Quibi, like did require us to like from day one land in the top 10 and stay there forever. Like the model would have worked if we could do that. And to the Hollywood marketing apparatus, the numbers that it takes to get there felt kind of small. If you can get 20 million people in to see Shrek on opening night, new IP, like surely you can get them to take their phone out of their pocket and download this thing and start a free trial. Now, those of us who have spent our life in Silicon Valley making software and, really, really tried to get people to show up and, download new IP in large numbers know just how hard that is. So maybe if I critique my own contribution to the math equation, maybe I should have beat the drum a little harder about just how unlikely it was that we were going to land the kind of distribution in month one that the model sort of required. I've had it, if I had to go back and do it again, I think I would spend maybe more time investing in illuminating that aspect of the digital universe.
That is such a good takeaway of just showing the leaders, here's the data, here's the assumptions that we're all betting on, and do you believe this can happen? And they probably would have said, yes, this will happen. I'm so confident.
What made it hard was it wasn't structurally impossible. Like if you had to be bigger than any app that had ever been made, then you could probably make the case it's impossible. But since you only sort of had to land in the top 10, like you couldn't quite say it was impossible. You could just say it was highly improbable. And maybe one of my mistakes was, I guess, I imagined that we would launch. And when the likely thing happened that we, got millions of people to download the app, which we did. And then that when we inevitably struggled to, retain those users at high percentages. I mean, we retained at sort of what I think of as like a good industry starting point, but we weren't setting any records on retention. I just imagine that what would happen next is like the thing that happens in all young companies. You would iterate. You would like grind on the funnel until a year later, 2 years later, 6 months later, whatever it is, you figured the formula out to get people in and get them to stay and get them to retain. And what I didn't appreciate was like just how quickly you go back to the foundational math, and then the math really says like you just can't. You can't spend 2 years iterating your way on, optimizing the funnels like you would in a startup that had a different cost structure. Like in a world where you have to spend, $1 billion a year making content, you just can't afford to not be a hit.
I think it's also important to just remind us it's okay for these things to happen. Like people take a bet, as you said, we're going to try this thing. Here's our bet. Here's our experiment. We're betting on this sort of format in this business. We're going to raise money from investors that know they might lose all their money. And it sometimes doesn't work out. It's like, it's part of the game.
It's certainly painful to take money from investors, even if they know what they're doing, and to not get them a return. I feel a real responsibility to investors to do better than we did at Quibi. But yeah, I mean, there is a risk reward thing that goes along with these investments. And part of the reason I get all the riches on the upside is that they're gonna bet on some quibbies along the way too.
So as you were talking, you said that it was called New TV, and that sparked a memory. And I searched my email, and I actually got an email from a recruiter in 2018. We just kicked off a very special executive opportunity, the CPO at New TV, new venture in Los Angeles, with Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman, raising $1 billion, working with top talent. Are you interested in exploring this opportunity?
Lenny, your story could have been so much different.
This could have been Tom's podcast. Lenny, tell me about what happened at Quibi.
I would take that trade.
I don't know. There's pros and cons. They even sent this whole PDF. A TV in your pocket. New TV. Yeah. Amazing. All right. I'm going to read through this and see what they pitched back in the day. Okay. Let's move on to things that worked out really well. Let's call them notable successes. Other products you worked on that worked out great. So I'll list a few of them. And maybe what might be helpful is let's just go through each one and share what you took away from that experience, lesson you learned from working on those products. And the ones that come to mind for me are Snap, Pandora, Apple, if we want to go there. Also, you built, I don't know exactly what you did there, but you worked on You Don't Know Jack, this game that I loved. I think if you're an elder millennial, you're just going to like, oh my God, I love that game. I don't even remember it exactly, but I just remember the visceral feeling of playing that game, and it was so much fun. So that's cool. I didn't know that you worked on that. And then there's also Sonos, which are on the board. So whatever order you think might be most interesting, just going through those. And what did you learn from that experience?
I worked at Apple in the interval where Steve was gone. John Scully, that kind of period. So System 7, System 8, Power Macintosh, like that whole era. And we were doing a lot. We shipped a bunch of great hardware. We transitioned the company from Motorola 68,000 CPUs to the PowerPC architecture. But particularly in that transition, we really struggled to ship consumer software features. I mentioned that, I wrote spring-loaded folders and some other consumer features like in my first 6 months at Apple, and they shipped 4 years later, actually after I'd left the company. I was a little surprised they were still in the software repository, even candidly. But I'll tell you that one of the things like culturally about Apple in that moment was, at least I felt like a person was really rewarded if they could make a kind of broad contribution across functions. So if you were, a talented software engineer, but also a thoughtful product designer, and maybe also had interesting input on product marketing, that you could build a really great reputation inside the company by playing all of those positions a little bit day to day. And so when I left Apple after 4 years, I look back on my time, I didn't ship as much software as I had hoped. And I felt like a little bit like a professional gadfly. I was like, 6 miles wide and like a centimeter deep. And I went to work for this company called Berkeley Systems. They, in addition to You Don't Know Jack, they made the flying toaster screensaver, if you remember.
Oh my God.
You remember the 90s.
How could you forget that?
And when I met them, they were kicking off this game development for this trivia game, and we're looking for someone to lead the technical team. And so I joined as technical director for the You Don't Know Jack franchise, managed a team of engineers, and it was a completely different culture than what I was used to at Apple. It was certainly the case that I was welcome to weigh in on the game design or the marketing or some other aspect of the deliverables, but my job was to build the software on time, with high quality, period. And like, if I did those things, I'd be rewarded. And if I didn't, like, I would not be successful. And no amount of insightful feedback on the gameplay or the packaging or whatever else I might want to do was going to benefit me and my career at all. And it was such a blessing to be forced to go deep on something, because I spent a lot of time developing chops as an engineering manager, but I also wrote a ton of software. And that's really honestly when I became a software engineer. Like, my college education was insufficient to get me there, and the amount of software I wrote at Apple was insufficient to get me there. But I came out of my Berkeley Systems You Don't Know Jack experience like feeling like I could really hold my own technically in a way that just wouldn't have happened. And so I do think that there's something to be said for a culture where there are swim lanes and people are encouraged to be like really, really exceptional in their lane. And so I feel really lucky that I stumbled into the You Don't Know Jack when I did. And it was also, I mean, it was the first thing that I worked on that had just like huge cultural, awareness for a couple of years. I mean, it's crazy. They're still making sequels. It has been nearly 30 years. And there are versions of You Don't Know Jack that are in, all of the stores, in the PlayStation store, in the Xbox store, in the iOS store. You can play new versions of You Don't Know Jack to this day. It's crazy.
Did not know that. I see the website now, and it's a little different, but basically the same.
So I'd say my lesson for, my lesson from You Don't Know Jack was definitely like, it really does pay to get good at something and not just be a generalist. And then, I mean, Pandora, it wasn't quite the next thing that happened after You Don't Know Jack was Pets.com. And then after Pets.com, there was nuclear winter in the industry. And I worked in enterprise software for a while. And after nuclear winter, I had this idea that I was going to build a destination for music discovery on the web. And I've been doing enterprise software. The consumer internet was like non-existent for those years, early aughts. But around 2004, things started to thaw a little bit, and you started to hear the first signs of the companies that we came to call Web 2.0, like Flickr would have been one of the early examples. And one of the enterprise software things I did was a personalization recommendation engine that used a vector space. It's like a lot of the things that we're talking about now in AI, albeit 20 years ago. And so I knew something about recommendation systems in the enterprise space. And I was super passionate about music. I'm not a musician, but I was that kid in college who would corner you and be like, oh, if you like this band, I got to play this for you. And, sit with stereo until you would like beg to leave. And so I had this idea that like maybe I can use the internet to do that at scale, not with just one person, but with, hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people, maybe introduce them to music that they would love, but otherwise would miss out on. And I promised that I was going to tell stories about luck in my career. There's been a gazillion of them, but one really dramatic instance of that is I was sort of biding my time to exit this enterprise software company. I was VP of engineering, I had a whole team that reported to me. I felt a lot of responsibility to exit in a responsible way, but I was really excited about this digital music company that I was going to start. But I wasn't telling anyone at all because I didn't want to kind of get back to the team. So I flew down to Los Angeles to go out to Coachella in the spring of 2004, and completely randomly, like physically bumped into a guy that I had gone to high school with on the polo field and hadn't seen him in a decade. And the thing that we had in common in high school was we loved music. And so I tell him the story of like, I'm going to start this company to do personalized digital music on the internet. And he said, there's this woman I work with who just left our company to move to Oakland to work for this little company called Savage Beast that like are also doing something in music recommendation. Do you want to talk to them? And I said, sure, why not? So I got introduced to Tim Westergren, who was the founder of Savage Beast. Savage Beast was like a 7 or 8 full-time employees at that point. They made a music recommendation engine that they licensed to other companies to put in consumer products. So Savage Beast's customers were Best Buy, who put it in kiosks, and AOL, who used it on the AOL Music website. And they were looking for a VP of engineering. And I got the offer, thought about it a little bit. I declined because it was kind of this B2B2C thing. And I really wanted to do something in consumer. I had an idea about the app. And like a month later, they called again and said, we keep talking to people. We really think that you're the person. And interestingly, one of the main reasons they thought that I was the person is they were really impressed by the fact that I had run engineering at Pets.com. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where like these things do pay dividends even when they're a disaster. And honestly, in what I would really say was like almost like a lapse in judgment. I said yes, even though it wasn't the product that I wanted to build. And I won't bore you with all of the details, but like 90 days later, after some typical early stage founder drama stuff, the founding head of technology and product had resigned, completely unrelated to my arrival. And the company had a new CEO, Joe Kennedy. And Joe had this idea for what he called one-click personal radio. And Joe's a product marketer and just the best CEO in the whole world. We spent 10 years together building Pandora. And he sort of gave me the keys and just said, like, as long as it fits the brief, one-click personal radio, like, it's all yours. And I got to build the team and the culture, in collaboration with him and Tim, the founder, over the course of the next 10 years. And it's just every good thing. So, I mean, there's just a million billion lessons from Pandora. I mean, everything I am as a product leader and an engineering leader comes from things that happen at Pandora. But maybe the thing that I think of first is, I think we met our early audience in like an incredibly genuine way. For example, when we launched, the support at Pandora.com was an alias for all at Pandora.com. So if you sent a customer service request to Pandora, every single person in the company received it. And because we made a decision to have no customer support team in the first year, the expectation was that whoever sees the request first should respond to it. And so, you would write to us and you would get the founder, or you get me, or you get the engineer who wrote the feature, or you get the CEO. And there were no macros to like respond to commonly asked question. There was no read the FAQ. There were no rules about what you could and couldn't say. If the person's like, I think this feature is like stupid and broken, we would encourage people to say, like, you know what, I think you're right. And I'd like really struggling to get our stupid head of product to agree with me. Would you, I'm going to CC Tom and maybe we can convince him that, this was a bad decision. And we did all of that because we thought one of our like superpowers as a young company was that we could just like engage with our audience, like as real human beings, not like as a shiny brand that was trying to, be something that we could just never be. Like this period is where the iPod and iTunes are like at the peak of their powers. And so, there was no way we could sort of out Apple on the brand front. And so we were just ourselves. And I think it really, really was a catalyst for the word of mouth that developed around Pandora. And like, we never spent any money on paid user acquisition, like literally no dollars in the entire time I was there, because people love the product and they told their friends about it. And that's how it grew.
I saw a stat that you grew Pandora from 0 to 80 million users, from 10 employees to 3,000 employees, from 0 basically to a multi-billion-dollar company. So
we did those things.
Not bad.
We did. We also, I mean, I think my product stewardship, like in some ways, set the scene for Spotify to walk through the digital streaming door and like show us the exit. So Pandora is, again, such a privilege to be able to work on something that touched and continues to touch tens of millions of people's lives every month. But it's bittersweet from the standpoint that I think we had an opportunity that we, in some ways we misplayed.
My mom is still a huge fan of Pandora, uses it every day for whatever it's worth.
I mean, it's still going. And there's the numbers are still tens of millions of people in the US listen every month. So it's a thing, but yeah, it's a little sad that it didn't have quite the staying power that some of these other things that have come along since have.
Just on that topic, do you think there's something that you could have done, someone could have done? Do you think there was an opportunity to become Spotify? Or is it the business model and the math formula was set up in such a way that it was nearly impossible?
One of the things that was tough for Pandora was that when we started it, digital music was like a category that no investor wanted to touch. It was lawsuits. There was no money to be made. There were relationships with the labels that were completely impossible to nurture. And there have been no big outcomes. Like I think the biggest exit in digital music when we got going was, I think Yahoo had bought Music Match for like $400 million. And so that was seen as like kind of the ceiling on the opportunity. And, along the way, we found investors who believed in our vision and invested, ultimately hundreds of millions of dollars in the company over its pre-public years. But there was never like a investor enthusiasm for the company in the category that was anything like the investor enthusiasm that a company like Spotify enjoyed just 6-7 years later. Snap enjoyed for, its, pre-public tenure. And, I think part of what was different for Spotify is that the comps were not Music Match at 400 million. They were Pandora at 8 billion. But even above that, they were, Netflix at 100 billion. And so investors just had this new sort of optimism about what you could do in subscription and in streaming and Spotify really played that to their advantage in a way that we couldn't, because we had gone public and the public market investors were still trying to, figure us out. So we didn't have access to capital. It was very hard for us to take the same kind of risks that Spotify took. But then I think we just completely misjudged one really important thing, which is that we were really inspired by disrupting terrestrial radio. Terrestrial radio is like the predominant form of music consumption in the country. People spend, I can't remember the exact stats, but it's like, by minutes consumed, it's something like 10 times more music minutes a month on radio in the aughts and early tens than on owned music. And the advertising supported sort of radio market was a $30 billion category, and recorded music was $8 billion. And so we had this idea that we're going to reinvent radio, and Spotify and RDO and Apple Music and like the 14 other, Rhapsody, which was Spotify before Spotify, they were all going to chase this smaller owned recorded music opportunity, and that we could be left relatively alone over here going after the less sexy but actually bigger market. And I think we just got it wrong. It should have been obvious that inevitably all of your music in any format was going to be delivered, as a stream from the cloud, and that the record labels in particular were going to set the terms on what the structure was. And the structure that they preferred was the Spotify structure. And we operated under a different licensing regime that they hated. That was a statutory license that we got from the government. And it was exceptional. It would have been exceptionally risky for us to come out from under the statutory license and do direct deals with the labels. But it was a requirement to play in the world that they imagined as the future, and we should have imagined as the future too. And eventually the company got around to it, but it was too late.
It's interesting that so much of this was rooted in that original vision that you shared of Pandora, of the smart radio in your pocket. Like,
one click so for radio.
One click personal radio, that like you just stayed on that track, even though there was this other track. But I think it's important to point out, you said it was like 7 years later. And I feel like there's this interesting trend with the companies you've worked at, Pets.com and Pandora, that it's too early. You just come too early at these ideas. And I feel like that tells me Quibi might still happen. There's a Quibi coming 7 years from now.
What's really, really funny about that? Just today, there's a headline about a Hollywood produced show that's launching on Instagram Reels and TikTok that was shot vertical. And the headline is literally something like, "Is TikTok the new TV?" And it's pretty funny that literally that's what Jeffrey and Meg called it when they were incubating the idea. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that purpose-built video for mobile looks a lot like TikTok, and I don't want to take anything away from all of the innovation in that space that they and the other players are driving that Quibi didn't capture in its initial product definition. But obviously we stare at our phones consuming video of all kinds, all day, every day. So there's definitely something there.
The PDF that I mentioned that I got from the recruiter, the first page again says, "You have a TV in your pocket." So it's exactly what they're pitching. That's amazing. All right. I think what I've learned, I need to bet all my money on this new Quibi clone, because the timing might be right. This episode is brought to you by HelpBar by Chameleon, the free in-app universal search solution built for SaaS. Your help content lives outside your app and is scattered in many places, forcing users to waste time hunting for answers. HelpBar solves this. It delivers answers directly inside your app and eliminates context switching. Users can search or ask questions to get AI-generated answers and lists of the most relevant documentation from all of your help sources, including your knowledge base, docs, blog, and video libraries. You can also use HelpBar to navigate your app and launch actions, such as scheduling a meeting or viewing an interactive demo. The best products today use Command K for in-app search and navigation. HelpBar makes that readily available within your app without engineering or new code. Give users a faster and more delightful self-serve experience that reduces friction and increases in-app engagement. Upgrade your user experience with this modern component and supercharge your product-led motion. Sign up for HelpBar today. It's free and easy to set up in minutes. Check it out at helpbar.ai/Lenny. That's helpbar.ai/Lenny. Let's talk about Snap briefly, and then I want to have a couple more questions.
At Pandora, I was the head of product and I was the head of engineering, and our CEO was brilliant, but he was a product marketer Joe was like all things. He was an engineer by education and a great marketer and a great finance person and like just such a utility player at a very, very high level across every discipline. But he was also really, really good at letting his team do their jobs. He really let me run product and engineering. And so, not only did I have tremendous latitude to make good and bad decisions about product, I also got a seat at the table to like help lead the company. So rewarding, so gratifying, best professional experience that one could have. So I leave Pandora after a decade. I take like a year and try to figure out what I'm going to do next. But after about a year, I got introduced to Evan. And it's kind of a funny story. A mutual friend sent this introduction over. Evan immediately responded and said, why don't you come down to Los Angeles and like have a coffee with me? So I fly down. It's not clear if it's a job interview or like what it is really. I mean, I was just like lightly exploring things that were out there and was a big fan of what he was doing with Snapchat. So I spent like 45 minutes with him, and then I spent 45 minutes with the head of engineering and another 45 minutes like the head of legal. And then they tossed me into a conference room with like a dozen product designers, all in their mid to late 20s, many of which had gone to school at Stanford with Evan. I would come to learn like all really, really, really impressive, super, super talented people. But like, it was just like 10 of us sitting around a conference table. And it wasn't really clear that they knew why they were talking to me, but we had kind of a, hour-long free-ranging conversation. And so I left, and I thought it was like a totally fascinating morning, but I wasn't sure what had happened really. It was like with these interviews, like it all seemed very ad hoc. Is there a job opening? Like it was like a little odd. And I went to lunch on Abbot Kinney and got a text from Evan's admin saying, can you come back to the office? Have you gotten on your plane yet? I was like, I don't know, I was just like ordering lunch. I'll just come back right away. So I go back. Now it's like 1:00 in the afternoon. This entire thing started at 9:00 in the morning. I sit down in the conference room. Evan comes in with a manila envelope and says, we loved you. We'd like for you to be our VP of product. And like handed me a written offer, like all the terms, like the stock compensation, the whole thing. I'm gobsmacked. I'm flattered. Like, this is like really playing to my ego. I kind of can't believe that this company that feels like maybe the most interesting thing that's happening in consumer tech, that, they're, notoriously brilliant and mercurial founder has like taken enough of a shine to me that he wants to like give at least some of the keys to the product kingdom over after such a short courtship. So I leave, and when some of that buzz wears off, I start to wonder if there's like some red flags or maybe. So I tell Evan, listen, I'd like to come back and like meet more of the leadership team, spend more time with you, go a little deeper on what this means. And so we extend our courtship by another week or so. And I, super impressed by the rest of the leadership team and the product thinkers and industrial designers and things that I was going to get to work with on a daily basis. And So I take the job full knowing that it's like going to be wildly different than Pandora. We had all of this latitude to like kind of do whatever I might want to do. And in the, the context of Snapchat, at best, I was going to be Evan's kind of right hand, person that principally executed his vision. And that's certainly what it was. I mean, Evan and I ended up having like a really great collaboration, but it was certainly most days I was executing on his vision, both at a high level and very much in the details. And Evan's truly brilliant. I mean, and he's also actually a really nice guy. I think in some ways he gets a bad rap for, he has very high standards, but he's a very kind person in my experiences with him. But it was a super exhausting job and not as soul satisfying as I wanted it to be. And after a couple of years, like I said, I thought maybe I just wanted to like make croissants or something. But one really, really big, important lesson that I learned at Snap is about risk taking. And like when you have the financial support and the foundational relationship with your investors that Evan has, it really allowed him to take these really big swings, acquire technology that he thought was game changing, build features speculatively that maybe would be pruned in any other product roadmap planning process because the odds of them having an outsized impact were modest. And it just allowed him time after time to like make bets that paid off. And like, we forget about the ones that don't work when there are so many home runs, in those years. And we didn't have environmentally, we weren't set up for that at Pandora, but I think in some ways, like I wasn't temperamentally inclined to those kinds of big swings. And I take bigger risks and encourage bigger swings now because of things I learned from Evan and Snap.
That is an awesome story. It resonates a lot with what Brian shared about how he thinks about product now, with just kind of telling people kind of what to build versus very bottom up. Tell us ideas you have. Did that impact the way you run? We're going to talk a bit about you as CEO now, but I guess, do you have a place you try to be of CEO as here's what we're building?
As a product oriented CEO, like how much you should kind of lean in to the details versus set direction and create an environment where great people can do great work. I suspect there's not one answer that applies to every company stage. When I was at Apple, one of the reasons that we struggled to ship things is that Apple did a great job of assembling incredibly, incredibly smart and talented people. Just like everyone around me at that early stage in my career was so inspiring. But one of the side effects of that is we would get in a room and we would turn over some problem or opportunity, and we would talk ourselves out of every good solution because it wasn't perfect. I used to joke that like Apple was like the only place in the world where like a vote of 1,000 to 1 was a tie, because that one person would be so thoughtful in their critique that the other 1,000 people would be like, that's right. And even though there's been this huge consensus of what the right answer was, we would kind of talk ourselves out of making decisions.
That one wasn't Steve Jobs necessarily. It could be somebody else.
He wasn't there.
Wow.
So I think what broke Apple out of that mode was Steve came back and like they didn't vote anymore. Like, Steve was just making the call. And so I have some sympathy for Brian and Evan, who have these big, thousands of people working for them. And as they delegate, they grow frustrated that there's not progress at the pace that they're looking for, and that there's indecision, and the people on the teams report that there's just like churn and no progress, and there's fiefdoms and politics and all the rest. And that as the CEO, as a brilliant product oriented CEO, they are uniquely situated to come in and cut through all of that garbage and, get the trains running on time again. Having said all of that, I also think that it can be a mistake to be that kind of leader in a smaller org, because part of the opportunity in a small org is to assemble a group of people that are incredibly talented, that believe in your mission, and who you can easily influence with a much lighter touch and set them up to build a culture in an organization that can execute. And so I see my job as CEO is to try to surf that edge of like, I'm really in the details. So I deeply understand the business and the product decisions that we're making and the processes that we're using to run the business, but not overplay my hand with respect to dictating outcomes. The one thing you'll always have as CEO is no matter how much you tell the team that when I swing by their virtual desk and say, I've been thinking about this little detail. It's not important right now, but like, what do you think? It's like 9 out of 10 times that person is going to go and start working on that thing. And so you do have to be just really careful about the way you engage in some of those details, I think.
There's a really good episode I had with Lane Shackleton from Coda, and he shared this framework called flash tags that they use at Coda, and I think it comes from HubSpot. You tell people, here's what this opinion is. Is it an FYI? Is it a suggestion? Is it a do this? There's like 4 of them, and one's like, I will die on this hill. You need to do this.
I try to do a lot of that. I wish I could say that in my experience that pays off. I off a lot of time, even the stuff I say very clearly, just one person's opinion, focus group of one, don't change your priorities to go work on this. Like it has more of an outsized impact on people's behavior than I intended.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Coming back to your journey, we've talked through the story up until getting to Quibi, but 2 years ago, you went in a whole new direction and you are now the CEO of a company called Xero. What is it like to move from just being a product leader and engineer leader at a company to being the CEO for the first time? Why did you choose Xero as that role? And what have you learned as CEO that you wish you knew as a product leader or engineer leader at a company that listeners might find useful?
It's been a really, really incredible couple of years. In the aftermath of Quibi, I spent a lot of time sort of, as we all do, sort of, soul searching about what I learned and what I might want to do next. And, as I thought about it, I realized that I really wanted to move on to something where I could have like a direct impact on the culture and values of the company that I was involved in. I really, got that opportunity at Pandora in a big way. And, I had spent the 5 years of like Snapchat and Quibi working for Evan and Meg and Jeffrey, who are all incredible business leaders, but have their own very specific sort of style and approach. And that leaves a mark on the culture that's unique to the founder. And then as we just, discussed, like I'm always really interested in building things that are near and dear to me. And I was particularly thinking about like, what can I do that could have like a really positive impact on the world in my next chapter. I've been in an awful lot of media stuff through the years, video games and streaming services and so forth. And it seemed like maybe there was something that had a little bit more weight to it that I could spend my time on. And so, my first thought was I would start something. So I worked a company idea. I was kind of quietly workshopping for some months and completely independent from all of that. It's, 8 months into the pandemic. And my own personal health was at an all-time low. I was 50 or 60 pounds overweight. My cholesterol was in the red zone. I mean, I was like out of breath climbing stairs, which is something that I had never encountered in my life before. I'm a bit of a yo-yo dieter, and I'm always like kind of critical of my, like looking in the mirror, but I was never ever really worried about my health, my longevity, and suddenly I was. And so my solution to that was to like go really deep on metabolic health, like just like thousands of hours of podcasts and videos and, glucose monitoring patches and Aura rings and digital fitness gear, and just to try to understand, the things that impact health and longevity. And as much as I would like to report that what I learned is that there's some like magic pill that you can take, maybe some like off-label rapamycin or something. The truth is that to live a longer and healthier life, you really have to attack what I would call metabolic disease, which manifests in overweight and obesity and prediabetes and diabetes and high cholesterol and all of these things that impact your long-term health. And so I found Xero in this path, and was using it to help in my own sort of health journey. And Mike Mazer founded the company 4.5 years ago. And he and I were talking in this interval about my own experience with the product. I was just kind of giving him product feedback and so forth. And he was telling me a little bit about his own entrepreneurial journey. And somewhere in the conversation, Mike said, my intention is to step up into the executive chair role and to find a CEO for the company. So again, like in my story, just over and over and over, this incredibly fortuitous thing happened. I just sort of knew immediately that it sort of ticked all the boxes. Here's a chance to, lead something that already had some momentum, to impact the culture and values in a really direct way, and was like really, really close to my own personal journey. And so, we've got a great little company, 27 people. We've got more than 1 million users on the platform every month. Over 100,000 of them pay us with tens of millions of dollars of revenue through the years. And we had double-digit growth even coming out of the pandemic when lots of health and fitness companies kind of saw retreats. And most importantly, it actually works. 75% of the people who use the platform lose weight. People lose on average 5 to 10% of their body weight in the first 60 days. And because of the success that people have, we grow just completely organically. We have no paid user acquisition at all. It's really a word of mouth business. But that's not to say that, it's not challenging. All startups are challenging. And what we've really focused on for the last couple of years is we've been really focused on unit economics, like really trying to understand how much value can we derive and deliver, for every person who downloads and, installs the app. How do we, convert them through all of the funnels efficiently and get them engaged with the product and get them to retain and sort of drive that up in a really systematic way. And, you look at my whole career, I'm definitely a person who started off thinking software development was like mostly in art form. You find, brilliant visionaries who have a deep understanding of human behavior, and they craft solutions for problems that other people don't see, and they make them delightful, and they get all the little details right. And, when you found product market fit for the art, then you sort of optimize them through a really sort of quantitative sort of take. And so I'm definitely a person that sees both sides of that sort of left brain and right brain, equation that's important in software. But here's the thing that's really, my eyes have really opened to in the last 2 years. While companies are definitely the software that they make and the products that they deliver, and that there is an art and science to that, as I described, there is also, if you step back, there is an equation that describes the business. It talks about like how you turn investment into returns. And I suppose if I had come up through finance and been a business major, that maybe that's the way that I would have conceived of companies to begin with. So maybe it's a little embarrassing that I had to be 53 years old before the scales fell from my eyes. And I was like, oh, like companies are equations. And so, when we first started talking about lifetime value and customer acquisition cost and getting those two things balanced and just sort of thinking about the unit economics of the business, my natural instinct was to go immediately to sort of the leaf nodes of the equation. Like, oh, what percentage of people do we convert from install to registered, and from registered to trial? And these like very sort of way down at the bottom of all the funnels, and to like ask the product teams, like, let's try to optimize these. And in the process though, of trying to understand where we could take the business as we optimize those various dimensions, and trying to understand too, which of the dimensions had the most leverage, I started building these ever more sophisticated models that describe the whole business. In startups, you get to wear a lot of hats, and definitely a hat that I'm wearing that I didn't anticipate at all is I am the full-time FP&A guy for Xero. And so I built this sort of spreadsheet that aggregates data from all of our business intelligence tools and raw data from our subscription transactions, and looks at all of our historical results and all of our expenses and spend, and then can use that to predict future scenarios by sort of manipulating all of these variables. And it's just not at all the way I ever thought about products before. And I know that you've got lots of listeners who are like, this guy's an idiot. Like that, this is a fundamental way to contemplate, product work. But if there's anybody out there like me who sort of thought of it as art first and then sort of optimization in the details, it is really, really powerful to spend the time to create the model that describes the whole thing. So you can identify like, what are the high leverage points to focus on? So we've been doing a lot of that at the company in the last 2 years, and it's really starting to deliver incredible results. Like everything in life, you sign up for things so you can learn, and that's the big one for me in the last year.
I really love that takeaway of, as a CEO coming back to share, here's what you should be thinking about, that the CEO is probably thinking about as a product leader, you may not be, of trying to actually spend the time to think about the business model and understand it deeply, because your founders are thinking about it all the time. And so if you're not, you're missing out on like, here's a way to influence them. Here's a way to.
It's so funny too, because it's a thing. I suddenly understand something that mystified me through my entire career, which was I'd go to board meetings and, the investors would ask these probing questions, but they were really never about the product and what the product did and what the product roadmap was and like what the features were and what this, it all seemed to operate at this level that sort of was almost completely independent of the details of like what is the solution you put into the world, which is a product, oriented thinker, was just completely baffling to me. And I now realize that they were tilling the soil that I'm talking about. They were tilling like it doesn't really matter what the screens are and what the features are. And it certainly matters, but there's another higher order way to look at a company, which is really about the optimization of this equation. And I think particularly if you sit on 25 boards, it's probably a much more efficient way to evaluate how your companies are doing and where to spend your time and how to help by thinking about them abstracted up at that layer. So, I will never stop thinking about software development as being an art form, and I will never stop enjoying, the days when I get to sort of lean in on the details. But it's been pretty eye-opening.
The other thing that stands out here, one is, I think this is especially true for consumer subscription apps, which I've done some research on, and basically they never work. There's Duolingo, there's Zero, which I didn't know how much scale you guys reached. My math here real quick. So you have 1 million users, 100,000 paying users. You charge like $10 a month. I know there's a discount for an annual plan, but basically you're making somewhere $1 million a month, which you don't have to confirm or deny it, but that's the math I just did. And that's crazy. So congrats. That's a rare, successful consumer subscription app. It never happens.
And like I said, every startup is hard, and I never stop being surprised at the new hard things that pop up every day. But we're on a really great run. We've had a tremendous year, and I'm just so proud of the team we've assembled. They're incredible to the last.
Part of the reason you're so successful is exactly what you said. There's a huge focus on LTV, CAC, the math formula, because for these sorts of businesses, that's the crux of it, is can you acquire people for less money than you need to spend?
One thing that's really fortunate for Zero is Mike Mazer, who founded the company, and I have both been sort of around the block long enough and enough times that, we remember 2008, we remember 2000. And so in these moments, like kind of in the pandemic, there were companies in our category that were raising hundreds of billions of dollars with the intention of sort of throwing it at paid user acquisition. And we made a conscious decision to optimize the value of the organic traffic that we were getting and to drive our growth through LTV expansion rather than top of funnel expansion, which was candidly not in fashion in 2021, 2022. Turns out it's much more in fashion these days as companies are called upon to be much more capital efficient than they were during the pandemic era. And so I guess I feel somewhat fortunate that my natural inclination as an entrepreneur is more in sync with the expectations of the market than it was for a while.
Okay, so you've probably had the longest career arc of anyone I've had on this podcast. You've worked at all of these different companies in a lot of different phases. You're still at it. And I'm curious what you've learned about how to maintain your mental health and avoid burnout, essentially, through this journey. You mentioned you take some time off. Is there anything else you found, or is that a trick of just how to not burn out?
Do you know this Japanese concept called ikigai?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but share for folks that may not be familiar.
So the idea is it's a Venn diagram, and there are 4 spheres. There's a sphere that's labeled what you love. There's a sphere labeled what you're good at. There's a sphere labeled what the world needs. And there's a sphere called what you can be paid for. And where they all intersect is this Japanese idea of ikigai. It's like the intersection of what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. If you find that, it's ikigai. And interestingly, your listeners should go and find this, because there are interesting ways to label the other intersections, the intersections that where they all 4 don't come together. And what's really interesting is that the ones that are 3 but not 4, I think because they're the ones that are like close but not quite to this really satisfying thing. And so it's like when you find those, it's really easy to choose a job or to choose a path where you have 3 but not 4, which is a really great recipe for feeling like there's something just out of your reach that's really important. Anyway, it's a great framework to think about your life and your career. So to start, I'm incredibly lucky that like it's all ikigai for me. Like what I'm good at, what I love, what the world needs, what I can pay for, like I've always overlapped. And a big part of it is just like what I love is this world. Like I love software. I love building software. I love writing software. I love using software. Like people are like, what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I don't think I have any hobbies. And I think about like, well, what kinds of things do I do on the weekend for fun? And it's like, I'm like teaching myself After Effects or something, which I will immediately forget. But like, I just like, it's just sort of fun to go really deep on some piece of interesting software. So I'm very lucky. And so I think that has been super sustaining for me. Like one of the reasons I've been able to do it as long as I have without really burning out is that just like, it's what I do. And in some ways, it's why I come back to it. Like, it's easy to say I'm going to become a pastry chef, but like left to my own devices, like I use software. I make software. It's my hobby. It's my, passion. It's all the things. But a couple of thoughts about how one engages with their work. One thing is I'm really not like a hashtag hustling kind of leader. There was a woman that I worked with on the Finder just out of college that left a really big mark on me. My own style of work then, I think I mentioned that my memory of like flashing, like blinking the folder animation was like a 2 a.m. kind of thing. I mean, I was 23 years old. I woke up at 11 o'clock in the morning. I, went to the office. I screwed around and played, video games in the Apple Arcade and went to a couple of meetings and had lunch and stood at the whiteboard and pontificated about some nonsense. And then about 4 o'clock every day, I would start writing software, and I would write software until 2 or 3 in the morning. And then I would go out to dinner with people from the team in the middle of it and whatever. And so it kind of looked like I spent 14 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week at Apple. And I was celebrated for this. There was lots of nights where I would like work clear through the night, and my, boss would come in the next morning and be like, "Are you still here?" And I'm like, "I'm still here. Look at this cool thing I did." And I got a lot of attention for that. And then there was this woman on the team who showed up every single morning at 8:30, sat at her desk, wrote a ton of great software, and every night packed her stuff up and left. And she contributed more than I ever did. And I don't think she got the same kind of recognition that I got because of the way she did the work. And when we were building the team and culture at Pandora, I thought about her a lot and really made a point of saying that I just wasn't interested in like performative contribution, that it's the work that matters. And what I want to celebrate is if you can show up and do it and go home and have other things in your life. Because I think that's a recipe for being able to do it on a sustained basis rather than kind of burning yourself out. I think there's some nuance in this. I think 22-year-old me was always going to want to work through the night. And so I think creating space that's okay too is important. And I think maybe in some ways at Pandora, like it was almost like that wasn't okay. It was like, you should be taking more breaks. Why are you going this hard? But I do try to create environments where people have like a reasonable balance between their regular life and their technology life, or room for that if they choose it. And I do think that has helped through the years to help me keep at it. But I still work a lot of nights and weekends because I love it. It's it's what I do. Here's the other thing. I got very, very lucky with the Pandora experience. And got this sort of, outsized, probably inappropriate financial reward for being a part of it, and gave me options that I never imagined that I would have. And so after 10 years, I left, and I didn't know what I would do, but I thought I did really need a break. It was a really hard job. And that was definitely a moment where I needed some time to recover. But I think if you had asked me on that first day, I would say, like, I don't know why these people like find success and then like start another company right away. Like, why? Like, there's so many things you could do in the world. Why would you start another company? It's so hard. And I was particularly in love with the idea that I had access to experience. Like, I didn't really care about things. I wanted a fancy watch or whatever, a car, but I wanted to see the world, kind of. And so I thought, like, I'm going to just go and I'm going to live in London for 3 months, and then come back to San Francisco for a month, and I'm going to go live in Mexico City for 3 months. And like, I'm going to just have this like life where I'm like soaking up experiences. And after doing that for 6 months, the thing that I came to realize is that what I care about way more than experiences is relationships. And like, if you're the person who is constantly on a plane going, seeking out some new experience, like, it's really hard to form and maintain intimate, satisfying relationships. So I went back to San Francisco. I'm like, I can't be all over the world if I want to like be engaged with friends and like-minded people. And you know what people do on Monday morning? They go to work. And so like, if you want to be engaged with humanity, like, where they are on Monday morning is like at work. And so more than I had the itch to build things, which I do very much have, I had the itch to collaborate, to like be in the game with other people. So that was what took me to Snapchat, took me out of like chasing experiences and took me back to building again. And then, as we've already described, like, I at a point I thought, well, I care about like this collaboration, but maybe maybe it doesn't need to be software that I'm creating in the world. And Quibi like gave me a chance to sort of fall back in love with that process again. And here we are, more software.
Plus being on board of a hardware company. What you just shared reminds me of Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, where I don't know, have you read this book?
I have not.
Okay, it's like sold like a bazillion copies, and it like the core of it is that we get joy out of solving problems, and we think we'll be happy when we have freedom to do nothing. Mm-hmm. But it turns out freedom is only helpful to help us discover the problems we just want to keep solving.
Yeah, totally. I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
It sounds like that's the experience you went on. Last question. This new segment I'm going to call Contrarian Corner. And the question is there something that you have a contrarian opinion about, something that you believe that most other people don't?
There's a segment in our industry that believes this like very intensely, which is like, there's this belief that everybody needs to be a founder. And I think in some ways our industry would be much better off if there were fewer founders. I think in some ways there's an entire category of smart, creative, hardworking, talented, borderline visionary people who can raise that $2 million seed and go off and build some stupid company that's never going to go anywhere. That would be so much better off finding a team that needs their skill set and working on a problem that has, like, as I described, the mathematical formula that's going to win, that has the market opportunity that's like the right size, that has the 10x thinking that can really, and I'm a little biased here because I'm I am a CEO for the first time now. I've never been a founder, and I've been lucky enough to find a bunch of young teams that could benefit from my skills and enthusiasms, and sometimes to some success and sometimes to some embarrassment, but always really, really interesting. Yeah. If you're out there and you think that like the only possible way you can be successful in this industry on any metric, whatever metric you care about, you want like the acclaim of your peers, you want financial reward, you want, like any of the things that people aspire to, outsized impact on culture, like whatever the thing is that gets you out of bed every morning, you can achieve that, in collaboration with others. You don't have to be the person that raises the seed round.
I 100% agree with that. I'm always telling people, don't start a company. It's super painful. Very rarely works out. It's like so hard. I don't know what's harder, being a product manager or being a founder. Probably being a founder. They're both very hard.
Yeah, it is quite hard too. Yeah. I mean, and like, just to be perfectly clear, like there's something really special about founders. I like at both Pandora and now at Xero, the actual founders have from time to time say, well, you're like a founder. And I'm like, I'm nothing like a founder. You took all the risk, and like when I showed up, like there was a team and there was like, momentum and there was money in the bank. Like I appreciate your desire to say complimentary things, but like you're like a founder is not one that I'll take.
With that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. Are you ready?
I am ready.
What are 2 or 3 books that you've recommended most to other people?
I really love Elad Gil's High Growth Handbook. It's organized into chapters about sort of foundational company building a leadership team, building a board. And in addition to the thoughtful synthesis on that topic from Elad, there's also, he has an interview of someone that he does relevant to that section on each of the chapters. Really, really great read and super actionable if you're a leader in a young company. I mean, in a completely different end of the spectrum, I love big, complicated science fiction. I mean, there's like a lot of garbage science fiction out there to be sure, but when you find something special, it's like, it's the best. So probably through the years in that category, there's a book called Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It's just like a total classic. Everybody should read it.
I read that. I think I read the first couple and the first one.
Yeah. There is a sequel that's exceptional as well. And it's probably worth warning your readers that Hyperion is quite long and has an absolute cliffhanger.
I think they're making a show out of it, which is going to be wild. I don't know how they do a show around that book. I thought you were going to say this other book, A Fire Upon the Deep. Have you heard of this book?
Oh, that's so good too.
Okay. That's also very complicated, but incredible.
Yeah. I had completely forgotten about that. That's a very special book. There's a couple in that series too.
Yeah, I think I only read the first one. Also, 3 Body Problem is the other one that I always think about. It's come up a couple times on this podcast. Let's move on to the next question. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show?
I consume a lot of video content, both like, stuff that I'm very proud to talk about and stuff that I'm less proud to talk about. But I really liked the new Damon Lindelof show that's on Peacock called Mrs. Davis. So Lindelof, of course, from Lost and the new Watchmen on HBO. Mrs. Davis is about an AI that you wear in your ear, like the Her AI, and a nun that is hellbent on the AI's destruction. And it reads like an early Coen Brothers movie. It's super darkly funny and really, really thoughtful. And unlike too much streaming, I think it's 7 episodes, and it is a perfectly encapsulated story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and doesn't need to ever have another episode. It's amazing. It's worth the, get yourself a Peacock subscription for at least a month to watch Mrs. Davis.
Favorite interview question you like to ask candidates that you're interviewing?
There are 2 things about interviews. The first is I always encourage people when they're thinking about their interview questions to take any question that they're tempted to pull from their own current experience and with the goal of trying to like, how would this person solve this thing that I'm working through right now? Because it just calls in the other person to like speculate, and oftentimes like about your own business, a thing really well that they don't actually know anything about. It creates this imbalance between the interviewer and the interviewee that feels like out of sync with how I think about the kind of collaborative nature of a great interview. So I tell people like that almost every interview question should start with, tell me about a time in your career when, to give them permission to like, or to set their expectation that I'm asking them to tell me about something they've actually done that is relevant to the topic that I'm probing. So that's just a structural thing that I try to do. And then I usually towards the end of the interview, I ask almost everybody, imagine that you had like a really great day at work. Tell me about what was it that you did on that day? Because I'm trying to figure out is kind of like left to their own devices, what do they go to naturally because it rewards them? Because I think it's really important to find the highest, best use of everyone you hire. And sometimes you can get a little bit to the bottom of like, what's the highest, best use if you understand the things where there's a natural reward mechanism because it's like, well, I had this great day. I'm going to do more of that tomorrow. What was the thing? And it's usually pretty illuminating.
Is there a favorite product you recently discovered that you really love?
I have bought every pair of headphones on the planet, in part because Apple's headphones do not stay in my ears. They just like, I've sneezed one across the room. I've lost one down a drain pipe. They don't stay. None of them. The wired ones, the not wired ones, the in-ear ones that they're just, and it's left me feeling honestly like I am some kind of anatomical freak. Like I look at other people wearing them. I'm like, what is going on with their ear that it's just staying there? Perfect. It seems inconceivable to me. Nonetheless, I have a pair of AirPods Pros that I want to love and like kind of put up with the fact that I'm going to drop them, lose them, sneeze them across the room. But recently I came across this product from a company called EarTune that are these kind of their replacement tips. And they just have like the littlest bit of like compression foam on them. So they don't make the AirPods so big that they won't fit in the recharging case or anything. And they work. Miraculously, they stay in my ear. And Apple has this feature called like size fit or something. Go in settings, find your AirPods, scroll all the way down in the settings, and you can run this test where they play some audio and they tell you how good the seal is. And that revealed that my right ear is weirder than my left ear. So I actually have to use different tips in either sizes. Suddenly this sounds like a vaguely disgusting conversation to be having. Anyway, I'm just really thrilled about my ability to wear Apple's AirPods after all these years.
I think what we're learning is you are mutant. Your ears are, different.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll link to that product in the show notes.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite life motto that you often come back to or share with friends, either in work or in life, that you find useful?
I mean, you can't be like a product person without having an eye-rolly Charles Eames quote that's at the center of your existence. And for me, the Charles Eames quote is, the details are not the details, they make the design. And I just really absolutely believe that like the devil is in the details when you're a product designer, and be uninterested in nuance at your peril.
Final question. You worked with the creator of the GIF format. How does he pronounce GIF or GIF?
Yeah, so before all of this, I worked at a company called CompuServe when I was in high school.
CompuServe? I used CompuServe. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
There was a guy on the team named Steve Wilhite who invented graphics interchange format, GIF. And he was a straight out of central casting, 1960s neckbeard programmer type. And the first I had ever encountered, and very prickly. And it's crazy, but at the time, Steve would take all comers in the fight that it was pronounced GIF. Now, he's obviously wrong. It's obviously pronounced GIF. It's crazy to me now, 35 years later, this is still a topic that pops up on the internet every once in a while. It's somehow like Zelig. I cross paths with the guy who created graphics interchange format, and I know his opinion on the topic, even though it's an unpopular one.
Got it. So he likes GIF, but you agree it's GIF.
It's definitely GIF. It's obviously GIF.
Okay, great. We're on the same page. We've decided. Let it be known.
let it be known.
Tom, we've talked about successes, we've talked about failures, mental health, general health, all kinds of awesome stories. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you online if they want to reach out and maybe ask some other questions that I didn't ask? And how can listeners be useful to you?
I'm at tconrad on all the socials, from Twitter to Threads to Instagram. My DMs are open everywhere. And I would absolutely be delighted to hear from any of your listeners on any topic that they choose. And, what can you do for me? Well, I would love for folks to download Zero and give it a try and send me some feedback about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And we'd love to have our little product be part of your life.
Awesome. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.